Chapter 79. 3. The mysterious Asura is seen sitting with her legs crossed on the bed. She had just entered her sea of consciousness when a shot of pain hit her in the brain for a moment. Yu knitted up her brows and she pressed a finger between her brows to massage it. What happened there? She had not overtired herself, so why had she felt like that? Fortunately the pain had disappeared in an instant. But just as she was not paying attention to it, a terrible and blood-filled scene from Asura's hell flashed before her eyes. Within an enormous array of stars, a man and a woman were locked in a tight embrace, their clothes stained with bright red blood. The man's hand was gripped around the sharp blade thrusting towards his body which shielded the woman completely, but the dagger in the woman's hand stabbed deeply into the man's chest. Yu's eyes flared open, her long slightly up-slanted eyes were bright red, looking highly terrifying. A golden light appeared at the side and a golden-haired youth suddenly appeared where he then immediately pressed his finger lightly upon her forehead in between her brows. Yu instantly fell limp and her body slumped into a heap on the bed. Mistress! Mistress, are you all right? Zhang Mai asked worriedly as he plopped himself down beside the bed. What just happened to me? Yu's brows were furrowed up as she brought her palm up to feel her forehead and found that it was covered in a layer of cold sweat. Your soul seemed to have been drawn into Asura's hell that was filled with intense murderous intent. If I had not brought you back out in time, you will surely have been overwhelmed by that intensive murderous intent and kill every person you see. Zhang Mai said rather trepidly, his heart still unsettled. Asura's hell. What is that? Asura's hell is a kind of dimensional space formed by the immense mind power left behind by a powerful pugilist with profound cultivation, and because of the heavy blood and slaughter involved, it is named as Asura's hell. Yu suddenly fell silent. She thought back to the scene she had just witnessed, with two people in it, a man and a woman. It did not seem like this was the first time she had seen such a scene. There was another time she came to recall. It was during those few days that she had been unconscious from the barricaded spirit tower. She was locked within a space and she was not able to remember clearly what had happened. The only thing she could recall was that the sky was red, the sun was red, and the dark crows were also red. A whole large flock of red dark crows that exuded an aura of death cawed incessantly in the sky, their calls shrill and piercing to the ears, like they were mourning for all the people who were about to die. She remembered that woman, the woman whose face she could not see clearly had parted her red lips and said to her a single word, sorry. She had said sorry. Yu had probably not noticed it herself. Her eyes had grown red-rimmed, and a single tear fell from the corner of her eye. The golden-haired youth became frantic with terror, almost bursting into tears himself. Mistress! Mistress, what is wrong? Where is it hurting? Don't cry. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The mistress that Zhang Mai had seen had never once shed a tear in weakness no matter how difficult the situation became. It could even be said that his mistress was someone who did not know what cry was at all. This was the first time he saw a tear fall from her eyes and Zhang Mai was suddenly unconsciously feeling helplessly frantic. Hearing the youth's worried and flustered voice, Yu snapped back to her senses. What? Am I crying? She raised a hand up to wipe at her eyes and discovered that her eyes were wet. She was stunned for a moment as well. She did not know why when she thought of that woman in her dream, with that pitiful smile on the corners of her lips, and that one word she spoke saying sorry, had made her heart wrench up with an unspeakable pain for an instant, unexpectedly causing her tears to fall unconsciously. Little burrow, why am I seeing such strange scenes? I have never even seen those places before. Yu asked softly as she looked at the wet tear stains on the back of her hand. Chapter 79. 4. The mysterious Asura scene. Zhang Mai took a deep pause and then said, I think, that it probably has something to do with this body mistress has been reborn into. Yu was startled and she went on to say, are you saying it's a memory from this body? That's right, there is a very great possibility that is the case. She had heard it from Qin Bei before. It seemed like they were not Yen Su's biological children. Before their mother had married Yen Su, she was already with child. On one hand, Yen Su had developed feelings towards their mother, and on the other hand it was to repay the benevolence their mother had shown to him in the past, seeking to protect them. Then, what was their mother's real identity? Could it be possible that she really was linked to the cloud heaven in some way? Bright Moon Divine Temple, within the pitch-black darkness that had a countless number of spirit tablets hanging in the air, it was not known from when a faint red light had started to glow, its color growing deeper, turning a deep red like blood seeping out. The woman below looked as if she could see the painful struggle inside, her elegant lips turned up slightly in a faint smile, her voice soft, like the slightest breeze would disperse it, and it was not known whether she was talking to herself or saying it to another person. If you knew this day would come, why did you do that back then? All the pain and suffering you are feeling now, who would even know? The person at the side then came forward to say in a low voice. Her spirit body seems to have begun to be able to gain awareness. I believe that it will not be long before she will regain her consciousness. The woman however laughed and shook her head. This is still far from enough. She is still missing a small half of her spirit out there in the world. If the spirit is unable to join back together, whether she will regain her consciousness is still hard to say. Temple Lord, are you really going to have her resurrected? Heh. The woman laughed suddenly. She has to suffer a little or she will never learn from it. I've already told her that things like love and affection must never be touched, never ever. But she had insisted on breaking the taboo and ended up meeting such a wretched end. Speaking of that, the woman then said a little self-mockingly, but since time began, who was really able to fully escape from its curse? When the news that the Dark Legions were recruiting elixir cultivators was released, the entire cloud heaven was collectively taken aback. What kind of insidious plans does this bunch of devilish and unorthodox infidels have up their sleeves this time? They are actually trying to recruit elixir cultivators into their midst. It must be known that every one of their members all possessed extraordinary skills, the paths they took in their cultivation unlike the ways the rest of the entire cloud heaven practiced. Hence, no other place was shrouded in thicker mystery than them, with no one able to properly grasp their form of martial arts, which caused everyone else to be at a disadvantage when trading blows. If they allowed powerful elixir cultivators to join them, then how unbelievable is the Dark Legions going to become? Wouldn't they reign and run amok in tyranny throughout the entire cloud heaven? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Although the divine healers were not so adverse against the people from the Dark Legions due to the relationship between Bai Ji Yen and Lu Junyao, but they were after all people who helped the dead and saved the wounded, warriors who stood for righteousness. With their ancestors' teachings placed before them, they issued strict orders that forbade them from having any dealings with people from the Dark Legions, and anyone who disobeyed would be thrown out of the Divine Healers sect. Hence, although there was a reason why Bai Ji Yen did it, but he had still gone against the Divine Healers sect's rules, so to the outside world, he had announced that he was no longer the Divine Healers sect's young chief. The great family clan that had been handed down over for the past several hundred years must not be suffer the slightest taint to its name. Although the Divine Healers sect had already announced that there would not be able of their disciples taking part in the recruitment, but there were still many scattered elixir cultivators who roamed the realm that liked their willful and unrestrained ways, who came in free from any factions or entities. In an instant, the numbers of the Dark Legions suddenly strengthened by quite a bit. Chapter 80. 1. Changes just before parting. Sometimes having great numbers can also be rather frustrating. Most of the people were ones who fervently worshipped the great name, the Dark Lord of the Dark Legions, Lu Junyao. Hence once they joined, they all started to request an audience, but the problem was that Lu Junyao himself was not in the Dark Regions at that moment and they could only make all kinds of excuses to reject them. What are we going to do? Should we get the Lord to come back and hold down the fort with his presence? Sun Luo opened his mouth to suggest when he saw that things were spinning out of control. Mei Ji shot him a glance. And you think you have what it takes to get the Lord to come back? With the suave manner the Lord had left on the trip this time, it could be seen that he would not be coming back any time soon, and Meiji was not holding any hope in that happening. But we can't just continue to dangle all those people. If they come to discover that the Lord isn't in cloud heaven and start to have a change of heart, there will then be trouble. Sun Luo said in exasperation. The scholarly and refined-looking man then said slowly, among the batch of elixir cultivators, we do not know how many of them possess real skills. Unfortunately Bai Ji Yen isn't around as well, or he would be able to tell immediately. Just as the two of them were jabbering back and forth in conversation, a clear and melodious male voice sounded. The voice was clearly not loud, but it immediately made both of them become quiet. I still have one pill of those elixirs left over from before. Let all the elixir cultivators cultivate the exact same elixir, and only the one who extracts the purest essence can remain. The person who spoke was dressed in a full white robe, a man who possessed a gentle and elegant countenance with red eyes, the one called Little Monster by their internal members. Once those words of his sounded, the eyes of the two people lit up. Great idea. Little Monster, that brain of yours is really so useful. Of course, don't you see who his family is? Meiji snorted smugly, the expression on his face filled with pride. After the white-robed man with red eyes finished what he came to say, he then stood up and walked out, and Meiji followed right behind him. Heh, that Meiji has really been twisted around that guy's little finger. Sun Luo said teasingly. The scholarly man then replied like he had become so used to it. She has just become too accustomed to being haughty, and having met Little Monster who is even more arrogant than she is, she would naturally have no choice but to submit. What you said sounds very reasonable. Sun Luo nodded his head as he commented. Water Edge Kingdom Imperial Palace. It had been several dozen days since Qin Yili and his delegation had returned to the kingdom, and having taken medicinal herb baths and given elixirs daily over this short period of time, Yumu Chen had started feeling that his body was feeling somewhat different in several places. On this day, after Yumu Chen dismissed the imperial court, he stayed inside his own bedchambers to look through the letters and memorials sent in over the past few days. Uxin Yen had coincidentally come over to look for him, the light patter of her footsteps closing in from afar where the doors were then pushed open. Royal brother, what are you doing now? Yumu Chen lifted his eyes up, feeling a little surprised. Why are you so free to come all the way to my place? He did not know where the lass heard the news from that the three great sects would be recruiting new disciples in half a year's time. She already had enough of sparring with people in the Water Edge Kingdom, and she was insisting that she wanted to go participate in the trials. She was the only sibling born from the same parents, and he had naturally indulged her a lot, allowing her to always have her way with everything. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. But she had been going to the military barracks to get the guards to spar with her in order to increase her chances of passing the tryouts, and in regards to that, it had been just too bitter for words for everyone. Haven't I not seen my royal brother for several days already? So I came over specially just to see you. Uxin Yen said, looking every inch an obedient child, but she then suddenly leaned over close, her beautiful blue eyes staring wide like she had spotted something surprising. What? There is something on my face? Yumu Chen asked as he raised his hand up to touch his face. Uxin Yen shook her head with her face still looking incredulous. Royal brother, why do I feel that, having not seen you for the past few days, you seem to be a lot more energetic? Chapter 80. 2. Changes just before parting. Because of his body's frailty, though Yumu Chen's body still wasn't all that skinny, his complexion was always tinged with a pale sickly pallor, looking like the slightest gust of wind might just blow him down. But coming closer to look at him carefully, she could actually see that there was now a tinge of rosiness of health in his cheeks. Hearing her say that, Yumu Chen was taken aback a moment. Is that so? I had not really noticed it, though I am really feeling as if my body does not feel as weak and lethargic as before, and I do not lose my breath as easily as before. Really? Uxin Yen said, her face beaming with delight. Has my royal brother's health improved, and you will not cough out blood and fall unconscious out of the blue anymore? Mentioning about coughing out blood, he had indeed not encountered that for more than 10 days already. In the past he would at most be able to last 3 days before he would be hit with an insufferable bout of wrecking cough that felt like it would take his life away from him. Now he had actually gone through about 10 days without it coming back, and that was just too unbelievable. Uxin Yan's blue eyes were sparkling brightly. So that young lady really has such adept skills in medicine, and is really able to cure my royal brother's condition. Young lady? Mu Chen was startled. That's right. It's the very same young lady that Big Brother Yili has always been searching for. Uxin Yen said. But, she looks so very young, about the same age as me, but her skills in medicine is as good as that of an elder who has lived for several decades. It seems like she is extraordinarily gifted, and it's little wonder that Big Brother Yili values her so much. About the same age as you? Mu Chen's eyes flashed with surprise. Then. When did she and Qin Yili come to know each other? If they knew each other more than 10 years ago, that young lady might have just been born. So how did she come to know him? I am not very clear on that, but back when they met each other in the Green Wave Kingdom, they seemed to have recognized each other at first glance. Uxin Yen said slowly. Mu Chen seemed to have thought of something, and the expression on his face changed slightly for a brief moment before it recovered quickly. There seemed to be something illogical in all of this. But looking at the situation, with Qin Yili about to leave the water edge, even if there was anything illogical about it, it did not seem to matter. After the All Saints' Day festival was over and the curtains fell, the city was restored back to its original look. After the engagement between Xianyuan Che and Yen Ning Luo was annulled, the Green Wave Emperor continued to have a thorn stuck prickly in his heart. It was clear that it was to have been a great union, but those two people had been unwilling to, which then broke it all up. Yen Ning Luo, who was born with the birth characteristics of the phoenix and destined to be an empress. The man to marry her would definitely achieve greatness, but a pity that this phoenix was no longer to belong to the Xianyuan family anymore. Xianyuan Che had stayed in the imperial capital for such a long period, and he was about to embark on his journey back to the Faint Mist sect. He had been with the Faint Mist sect for 6 years, and in another 4 years, he would be able to leave the sect and choose to come back to continue living as the noble crown prince, or choose to go out and accomplish great achievements for himself. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. As the Green Wave Emperor was still young, there was hurry for him to come back to inherit the throne, so Xianyuan Che still had the freedom to choose. You are leaving already? 3 people were gathered in a winehouse, and hearing Xianyuan Che's words, Yu Jingzhuo raised his cup to say, "Come my brother, let me offer you a toast to wish you a smooth journey." Upon saying that, he immediately downed the cup of wine with a tilt of his head back. Although he was also a member of the Faint Mist sect, he was very relaxed towards the rules and regulations of the sect. Because he was a member of the Faint Mist sect that was specifically responsible for gathering intelligence, he was usually roaming outside most of the time and seldom returned to the sect. And it was because he was really capable that the sect was a lot more lenient with him. Chapter 80. 3. Changes. Just before parting, Xianyuan Che then did as he said and clinked his cup against Yu Jingzhuo's and downed his drink as well. Mo Fei Ran shook her head and laughed. Why the somber mood as you drink? It's not as if you're parting between life and death, so why are you being so dramatic? Xianyuan Che snorted lightly. Though we're not separated by life and death, but after I return to the sect, I fear that I will not escape hearing endless gossip and whispered murmurings. Mo Fei Ran was taken aback a moment, but he quickly recomposed himself. You mean the matter about your engagement with Yen Ning Luo being called off? What else? People out there probably already know all about it. At the end of the All Saints' Day festival, Yen Ning Luo had suggested to annul the marriage right before so many people. Sigh, those who are not aware, they might think that I, as the crown prince of a kingdom, is just a great bully who has been maliciously ill-treating her. Xianyuan Che said, his words dripping with sarcasm. Mo Fei Rant's youngest aunt was the Yen Ning Luo's mother, and the young lady could be considered to be his cousin. Upon hearing Xianyuan Che's words, he was somehow feeling a little awkward and did not know what to say. And Xianyuan Che had most probably had a little too much to drink, and he was a little more talkative. But how would all those people know the truth? Ha ha ha. She called off the engagement with me not because we did not see eye to eye with each other, nor was it for any other ridiculous reason, but because she had come to fall in love with another man. Mo Fei Ran, do you know who that man is? He is, ha ha ha. He is the man who is ashamed to have anyone see his face and wears a mask perpetually, the Duke of Vast Seas. Once those words came out, the expression on Mo Fei Rant's face froze completely, thinking whether his ears had been hearing things. What is the Crown Prince saying? The person Ning Luo likes is the Duke of Vast Seas. The wine cup held in Yu Jingzhua's hand spilled a little wine out, like he had been rather surprised. And Xianyuan Che was continuing to say, you guys don't believe me? Yen Ning Luo told me that herself, that she had liked that man since she was very young. Ha! The greatest prodigy. Her taste is indeed different from others. Yen Ning Luo liked the Duke of Vast Seas, and the one the Duke of Vast Seas liked was her real sister. Seeing the Duke of Vast Seas' expression and demeanor that day, it was clear that he liked and cared for that young lady a lot. Yu Jingzhua's mouth opened in mocking laughter. What a complicated relationship. The way was bright and well lit with lanterns till they came outside as they stepped out from the wine house, about to split up and go their separate ways. Several cold gusts of sinister breeze blew past suddenly. Yu Jingzhua had drunk the most among them but was the sober one. Because he was drank all the time, he had built up a strong resistance against wine. The gusts of sinister winds blew over them and he subconsciously raised his head up to look, where he came to see the black shadows flying past. The reactions of Xianyuan Che and Mo Fei Ran were slightly slower, but they had also noticed the presence of those black shadows which caused them to sober up by half. Who were those people? Mo Fei Ran asked in a low voice. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, it seems to be assassins from the Carefree Valley. Yu Jingzhua said with his eyes narrowed cautiously. Xianyuan Che then said indifferently. Let's go. Let's mind our own business. Upon saying that, he raised his foot and was about to take a step to go on his own way. The Carefree Valley's assassins were not that rare to see, as their members were spread throughout every corner of the constellation lands. Although they cushioned at the bottom among the three great sects, their scale was the most widespread. Their members could be often seen appearing in the night, as the assassins depended on carrying out spying and assassination missions to earn their keep. The few of them had not thought too much about it, and they had not left for long when Xianyuan Che's footsteps suddenly halted, the expression on his face changing. Chapter 81. 1. Set up for a fleeting moment, he seemed to have heard a familiar voice, and he did not know whether it was because he had drunk too much which was making him hear things. It was only till Mo Fei Ran called out to him from behind that he returned to his senses. It's nothing, go on and leave. And at that same moment, in a dense forest about 100 miles away from the imperial capital, a slender-bodied shadow in front finally came to a stop, his brows creased up as he stared ahead of him, seemingly rather frustrated. He was rather familiar with this place, but it was exactly because he knew this place well that he knew he must stop and not go any deeper inside. This stretch of forest had become mystifying boglands, and although he was surrounded trees that stretched further than the eye could see, once one reached the center region, it became a place filled with poisonous obstacles, and the land below one's feet would suddenly turn to bogs. If one was not careful and came to step into the boglands, then it would be hopeless no matter whether one called out to the heavens or to earth. At the moment that he hesitated, the sound of swishes broke through the air and several black shadows then appeared within the dense forest. Mu Chi, We do not have any bad intentions and merely want to ask young Miss Mu to come out to help us with a favor. The leader was a tall-framed man who stepped forward. He looked to be about 27 or 28 years of age and was rather stalwart-looking, seemingly a candid and straightforward man. The Carefree Valley's Assassins Alliance could be found in all corners of the Constellation Lands, and they were all dressed fully in black, their faces covered with a malevolent demon mask. This was to prevent themselves from being identified, and the most famous ones among them all in the Carefree Valley were the mysterious and highly elusive 10 Great Assassins. The assassins were classified in 3 levels as Heaven, Mystical, and Yellow. Above the Heaven level were the Gold Medal Assassins, who possessed even more terrifying powers. It was said that to employ a Gold Medal Assassin to carry out a mission, the price would not be lower than 10,000 gold, and it could well be imagined just how rare Gold Medal Assassins were. And the 10 Great Assassins were ranked even above the Gold Medal Assassins. They were part of the Carefree Valley's might, but was also an independent body of people, establishing an assassination temple within the valley. It was said that these 10 people were the Carefree Valley's trump card, and they were so mysterious that no one knew anything about them. The only thing that was known was that the 10 Great Assassins were an highly unconventional bunch of people in the Carefree Valley, as they would never hide their faces or aura. That was because no one had ever survived under their hands. And before his eyes, the group of about 6 or 7 people were all uniformly clothed in black and a demon mask, except for the man leading them, who did not cover his face in any way, which undoubtedly meant that he was one of the 10 Great Assassins. Mu Chi sighed inwardly at his bad luck today. He had just come out from the Mu Manor when he'd been marked by this bunch of guys. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Although he possessed rather great skills himself, but with so many people to attack him from all sides, and they also had such a legendary grade killer with them, the slightest offense taken with a misplaced word might very well cost him his life here. He silently considered his current circumstances and then opened his mouth to ask, "If you are looking for my elder sister, shouldn't you go look for her in the Mu Manor? What is the meaning of pursuing me so relentlessly like this? Could that demoness Mu Lai have somehow come to antagonize such a bunch of people in the past? With that tyrannical and aggressive character of hers, who considered herself above everyone, she just very well might have come to have offended other people." The tall-framed man then laughed softly and said, "Though the Carefree Valley and the Limitless Sect could be considered to share rather friendly relations, but since you are close to young Miss Mu, she would naturally agree to it if you plead with her on our behalf. If we do it ourselves, I fear that if negotiations turn sour we would have to do it the hard way." The man opened his mouth to explain patiently, his gentle and polite personality one that you would never expect to belong to a cruel and bloodthirsty killer. Chapter 81. 2. Set up Mu Chi's brows furrowed together. What can she help the Carefree Valley with? Besides being a little more skilled in medicine, there is nothing much else. He suddenly seemed to have realized something as his words trailed off, looking a little surprised. "That's right. It's exactly because she is skilled in medicine. One of our brothers was afflicted with a strange poison several months ago, and he is now in a critical state. And throughout the entire lands, only the Mu family will be able to save him if you will lend a hand." The man's voice was sincere. "If you are willing to help invite young Miss Mu to step forward, the Carefree Valley's assassination temple will then owe you people a debt of benevolence. No matter what kind of request you might make of us, as long as you say it, it will be accomplished." Strange poison. Mu Chi was taken aback before he said, "Since it's such a strange poison, then it must be rarely seen and hard to cure completely. Although my elder sister is the most proficient in medicine within the Mu family, I do not dare make any decisions I am not confident of on her behalf. If it turns out that she is unable to cure that person, wouldn't all of you then turn your anger onto her instead? You can very well rest assured on that. Although we are all killers, but it does not mean we cannot discriminate between right from wrong. In that case, I will make a trip back to the Mu family tomorrow and ask my elder sister's opinion on it." Mu Chi thought that he should at least tentatively agree to their requests first, or they would not let the matter rest. Moreover, he might very well gain by having them owe him a favor, although all this was just a plan made up out of convenience due to the current circumstances. Hearing that, the man standing right across from him clasped his hand over his fist and said, "The condition of that brother of ours cannot afford to be delayed any further. Better go ask young Miss Mu tonight instead. About that, if you were to interrupt Mu Kai while she was sleeping, she would surely fly into a rage." But he had no other choice but to plunge headlong into it. She couldn't possibly disregard the fact that his life was at risk here, could she? That morning in the Eternal Peace Duke Manor, something big happened. While Yen Su and the Duchess were having their breakfast, a servant maid suddenly came running in from outside, her clothes in a highly disheveled state. She fell heavily to her knees on the ground limply as she raised her tear-streaked face up. "Your Highness, Duchess, please help your servant address her grievance." Mo Hanyan's expression suddenly stiffened and she then said in a highly displeased tone. "Impudent lowly servant! Who let you come in to disturb His Highness' meal?" The servant girl was startled and scared as she went on to say in a sobbing voice. "Duchess, please forgive my impudence. Your servant really has no other choice." Yen Su looked at her torn and broken clothes, the bare skin that was exposed filled with green and blue bruises. It could immediately be seen what had happened to her with just one look, and Yen Su paused a moment before he put down his chopsticks. "What actually happened?" "Your servant brought the medicinal brew that was prepared for the second young master over last night, and the second young master suddenly wrapped his arms around your servant tightly, like he has lost his mind. Pulling and tearing at your servant's clothes. Your servant struggled with all her might and begged for mercy, but second master he had not only ignored my words, the servant lass wept as she spoke, even sobbing spasmodically at the end before she then said, pausing at every word. He went on to violate your servant's body, tormenting your servant for the whole night. It was until just now that your servant was finally able to escape after seeing that he has fallen asleep." Hearing the little lass relate a whole series of events, Yen Su and Mo Hanyan looked completely shocked, like they would never have thought that such a thing could possibly happen. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Mo Hanyan was the one who came to react first, her eyes growing wide and round with rage. "That little beast. He's just too much. To think that he has committed such a heinous scandal. I beg for the Duchess to seek redress for me." Seeing the way Mo Hanyan looked, the young servant cried even more sadly. Yen Su however looked at Mo Hanyan and said, "Before the matter is looked into clearly, do not make any hasty judgment. He would never believe it no matter what." He had heard from the old elder Qin Fang several times in the past few days that the child Qin Bei possessed astounding gift, and in days to come he will not lose out to little Ning. He had been thinking that if the child could stand up before the deadline was up, just how great would that be. Chapter 81. 3. Set up at such a critical juncture, how could something like this happen? He was such a clean-looking youth with pure and honest eyes. It was not possible that he could possibly be tainted by such an abhorrible incident in the slightest. With that thought in mind, Yen Su's face darkened further. "You have to think it through clearly before you speak, just how big a crime it is to besmirch your young master's name. A lowly servant girl like you will not be able to shoulder the consequences. Tell me truthfully. What really happened? Your servant does not dare to lie. Second young master has really violated your servant's body." The young servant girl was gasping in between sobs, looking highly aggrieved and pitiful. "Is your highness trying to cover up for him?" Han Mo Yen said with a laugh when she saw that. "Although he is your highness' son, but he had come to do something so despicable. The servant girl would have been seen by quite a number of people on her way here, and it will not do the Eternal Peace Duke Manor's reputation any good if news of this leak out. This duke will naturally know that." Yen Su said coldly. "Guards! Go to the tranquil abode and bring the second young master to me." "Yes, your highness." A young guard outside the door acknowledged, before he disappeared from his spot in an instant. And it was at a time that Qing Yu did not come home for the entire night. Because Qing Fong had been telling them for the past few days that he was making arrangements to send them out for training in order to enhance their survival skills. As after they are admitted into the sect, they would not face a lack of such similar missions, often needing them to sleep and eat in the wild, requiring them to be able to live for a period out in the wilderness. Such an experience would be something they need. After ascertaining the location, in order to prevent any unexpected mishaps, Qing Yu had gone to survey the terrain, and also to spend one night there. Besides encountering snakes, bugs, and wild beasts, she did not find anything out of the ordinary. But upon her return to the tranquil abode, she came to discover two servant girls pacing nervously in front of the door, occasionally poking their heads out to look around outside. She immediately felt that something was not right and she immediately took a few steps to go inside. "What is going on?" "Sixth young miss. You've finally come back. Second young master is in trouble." An adorable round-faced little servant girl said with red-rimmed eyes. Qian Qian came running out from the second young master's room this morning with her clothes all disheveled, and a while after that, second young master was taken away by his highness men. Among the servant girls that Yen Su sent over to serve, Qian Qian was the prettiest looking one. Damn it! She had been too careless. That woman had been so peaceful for such a long time and she had to come up with such a lousy scheme just when little Bei's talents were starting to show. Ha! Does that woman really think that I am just a soft persimmon to be kneaded and manipulated as she liked? She had not wanted to waste her time and energy with such an undesirable character before, but she had now crossed the line. This time, even if that woman does not die, she'll at least scrape off a few layers of her skin. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Seated within the main hall at that moment, were Yen Su, Mo Han Yen, and Yen Shicheng who had been summoned. There were also the whole group of the other women, who filled up the hall. The young servant girl in broken and shredded clothes was on the floor, and the depressed-looking youth was seated in his wheelchair, his eyes seemingly rather dazed. With Qing Bei so weak and frail, how could he possibly be capable of doing such a thing? Yen Shicheng said as he looked at the youth on the wheelchair, his brows furrowed up in doubt. Mo Han Yen glared at him. Cheng would the servant girl really have the audacity to slander her young master? But Qing Bei is someone who is physically handicapped. How could he possibly be able to inflict such brutal violence on a servant girl who has perfect use of all her limbs? Yen Shicheng knew that his mother had never liked the people in the tranquil abode. How could a matter like this be pushed onto a youth who had not even reached marriageable age? Chapter 82. 1. All full of holes. Ha ha ha, our heir. Men are born stronger than women, and if they really want to do something, how can a woman possibly be able to resist at all? The one who said this was a lady who was brought into the family right after one other royal concubine, but was a voluptuous lady without much of a brain. Once those words came out, Yen Shicheng immediately glared fiercely at her, which cowered her into clamping her mouth shut in an instant. Yen Su had not spoken a word all this time but just knitted up his brows, his face looking dark and imposing. The youth on the wheelchair seemed so dispirited and weakened now, like he was suffering from the after effects of having overindulged in debauchery. He did not want to believe, but the facts lay before his eyes, which gave him no choice but to see and believe. He had held great hope on the boy, doing all that he could to heal the boy's legs, that would allow him to go into the Faint Mist sect to learn cultivation and secure a great future for himself. Everything had been moving in such a great direction and he had always been rather satisfied with the child. But looking at the situation, was this a case of his real nature finally becoming revealed, forgetting himself in his newfound talents? Maybe deep in his bones, he was an extremely at such a young age and he had committed such a despicable deed. What kind of a scene would it be when he grew up in the future? In those few short moments, Yen Su's heart had already undergone a series of tumultuous changes, his piercing eyes tinted with the color of disappointment. His voice calm, he then said, "Qing Bei, if you do not speak up, you are silently admitting to it. Did you violate this young lass here yesterday? He did not even have the strength to speak at all, and it could be seen just how hard and mad he had indulged himself last night. If it was known that he would turn out like this, he would not have kept the boy with him back then. He had now brought nothing but shame to that person, which would forever not let her rest in peace even in death. Qing Bei just sat there to look up at Yen Yu on the high seat silently, seeing the undisguised disappointment and rage. That good-looking and pale countenance did not show the slightest ripple of emotion, but somewhere in his heart, it was suddenly starting to become clear right at that moment. He could not believe himself. Ah! His father. He would rather believe the words of an outsider than to choose to believe his own son. Simply because he was not Yen Su's flesh and blood, and so a certain level of estrangement still existed between them. Actually, if he thought just a little deeper into it, he would have discovered that it was all just one of Mo Han Yan's venomous schemes. But he did not even want to think about it at all, which just affirmed his guilt to everyone else. Qing Bei closed his eyes, and something suddenly felt like it had been unraveled in his heart. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. All the concern and attention Yen Su had shown him these days had already slowly allowed him to release the knot lodged in his heart. He had even been willing to let bygones be bygones in regards to the fact that Mo Han Yan had gotten both his legs crippled back then when he saw that Yen Su was doing everything he could to make it up to him. The two of them, Qing Yu and him, who had been abandoned from young, had made him pine so hard for love and concern. Qing Yu had said that he was being very foolish, and too soft-hearted. Just as the atmosphere had fallen to become unbearably stifling and oppressive where the air felt highly suffocating, the sound of light laughter suddenly came in from outside the doors, and a slender figure then appeared before everyone as it slowly came walking in closer to all of them. That person was dressed in white clothes that were not tainted by even the slightest speck of dust, her thick luxurious hair casually held together by a hairpin. She clearly looked like she did not care all that much about her own appearance, but everything on her just looked so highly suitable, looking somewhat languid with an indifferent air. The manicured brows were slightly upraised, and directly below them were an enchanting pair of eyes, long and narrow like those of a fox, tinged with the light of wisdom and farsightedness. Her elegant nose was tall, her tiny cherry lips curved up in a playful smile. It was a face so exquisite it was almost dreamy, which dazzled everyone in the hall as they looked at her in a daze. Chapter 82. 2. All full of holes. The one who was most surprised was Mo Han Yan. She had clearly just seen this young lady not too long ago, but it seemed that every time she saw her, she was so blindingly radiant that it made it impossible for people to shift their eyes away, where she looked even more outstanding than that woman in the past. Just seeing Yen Su's stunned and captivated expression told her as much. The young lady did not care about all the strange gazes everyone was looking at her with, and she did not even so much as glance at the youth seated in the wheelchair, but had walked over to come right before the little servant girl who was sobbing hysterically on the floor. Her slender fingers lightly lifted the servant girl's chin. Her voice was tinged with smile, but the icy cold in those phoenix-like eyes sent a shiver through her spine. Whoa, this little face is rather good-looking indeed. The servant girl was so terrified she was shaking visibly, not daring to even say a single word, but just let her tears continue to flow down her cheeks. Qing Yu burst out laughing and then turned to look up to the dark-faced Yen Su seated high up on the main seat as the corners of her lips curled up with a faint smile. Has father investigated clearly that this servant girl was bullied by Qing Bei? The evidence is clear, and he has also admitted to it with his silence. Yen Su said in a deep voice. Evidence? Qing Yu looked as if she had just heard something very funny. According to what father has said, just creating some ambiguous marks on the servant girl's body and having her come sobbing before you with her clothes in utter disarray to wail that little Bei has violated her, you have decided that there's no need to hear Qing Bei's explanation just because of a few words from some outsiders. So that is what so-called evidence is. I had thought that only the foolish and ignorant will come to believe such wild accusations. It must be known that sometimes, even what the eyes see for themselves might not be the entire truth. Father, you have greatly disappointed me. She stood there right in the front with her back straight and unbending. She was clearly saying such hurtful words, but her face was still smiling, her pair of beautiful phoenix-like eyes shining with a mirthful glint, like it was impossible to ever reach into the depths of her heart. That gaze. For just one fleeting moment, Yen Su seemed to see that person from those many years before, who had said these very same words to him. She had said, "Yen Su, I am very disappointed in you." He quickly came back to his senses. As if he was silently comforting himself, he waved off the strange feeling in his heart and said, "Unless you can find the evidence that can clear his name, otherwise, if news of this matter leaks out, the name of the entire Eternal Peace Duke Manor will be shamed." Qin Yu curled up her lip scornfully. There is no way of explaining oneself out of a trumped-up charge. But if father insists on evidence. She suddenly paused and her piercing gaze turned to look at Mo Han Yen on the other side. If I do not get a satisfactory reply on this matter here today, I will not mind scraping off a few layers of skin off the hidden mastermind behind it. Mo Han Yen was startled by that sudden gaze turned upon her out of the blue, but she quickly composed herself and there wasn't the slightest ripple on her face. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Hoof. I would like to see how these two bastard children are going to clear themselves of the accusation. So what if they possessed gifted talents? They will forever be beneath Ning Er's feet, never to be able to get back on their feet. I will never allow that woman's children to have any chance to even threaten Ning Er. Never ever. Qin Bei looked at the young lady standing there neither submissive nor aggressive, but striving just to defend him, and his heart was greatly moved once again. The heavens must have seen that he has suffered so much and hence they have sent Qin Yu to come to his side to protect him. No matter when, Qin Yu was always like a strong and sturdy castle around him that protected him, never allowing anyone to bully him. The hands inside his sleeves were tightly clenched up together to hide the trembling. In this world, only one person really cared and was genuinely concerned for him. That was enough. From today onwards, he will never again covet all those things that were not his to possess in the first place. Chapter 82. 3. All full of holes, but with the current circumstances, in order to make it seem real, he must not expose himself prematurely, or Qin Yu's ploy would go up in smoke. On the other side, Qin Yu bent herself down and looked at the servant girl weeping softly, the ends of her mouth lifting up slightly. "Come, tell me. Last night, how did the second master violate you brutally?" Those highly explicit words said in a smiling but mirthless voice caused everyone in the hall to become curious. What kind of a show is she going to put on now? The little servant girl was trembling visibly, looking like she was recalling something very horrifying before she then started to speak after a while. "Last night, your servant brought the medicine to the second young master." "What kind of medicine was it?" Qin Yu asked, as she raised an eyebrow. "It was medicine that His Highness asked your servant to deliver, a tonic to nourish the young master's body," the servant girl said in a soft voice. Yen Su nodded. "This duke has indeed instructed for people to send the medicine over." Qin Yu lifted her chin and said, "You can continue." The servant girl took a glance up at the main seat and then lowered her eyes as she continued, "After the second young master took his medicine, your servant was just about to leave when the second young master suddenly grabbed your servant and started to tear at my clothes, and he said that he likes me." Qin Bei's eyes turned cold, filling up with contempt. Has he gone blind? That girl thinks that she's rather attractive and is always hovering around before him, always trying to seduce him and win him over, but he does not even know her name. And saying that he likes her. In your dreams. He will rather fall in love with anyone plucked out from the streets than like her. Qin Yu saw the undisguised contempt and anger on the youth's face and she could not help but smile for a moment before she turned to look meaningfully at the woman up on the high seat who had been calm and composed throughout. "Ha! Mo Han Yen just cannot remain idle. She had just not come back for one night and that woman already cannot wait to pounce upon little Bei. When she came back, the fragrance of the drunken immortal flower still had not dispersed throughout the night. Just how heavy a dosage it must have been. Fortunately, the drunken immortal flower only numbs a person's senses and weakens them to the point that they are temporarily not able to speak. Once the poison is alleviated, it does not harm the body much. Though the youth seemed a little weakened, he still looked rather conscious and aware of his surroundings. The servant girl was still sobbing aggrievedly as she said, "The second young master is my master and I am merely a lowly servant. Whatever the master wants, your servant has no choice but to comply. But the second young master. He has a particular perversion, which nearly tormented your servant to death. Didn't you mention before that you struggled hard and refused to give in, fighting to break free? And now you are saying that the master's words must be complied to?" The person who said this was Yan Shicheng. The servant girl had clearly not expected that anyone would say anything against her words at all and she was stunned for a moment. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Mo Han Yen had similarly not thought that Yan Shicheng would suddenly speak and her beautiful eyes turned indignant at that moment. "Cheng what do you know? Don't make things messier than it already is." "Mother," from a little servant girl, "and we're all sitting here to hear her spout such nonsense to besmirch Qing Bei's name. I think that she saw that father has recently been treating Qing Bei a little more affectionately and she spiked the medicine with something. Once what's done cannot be undone, at the very worst she could still be very well made a concubine." Yan Shicheng said with a scornful laugh as he looked at the stunned servant girl. "From what I can see looking at Qing Bei, it's not that he is refusing to speak, but he is just unable to talk." With those words, the faces of Han Mo Yen and the servant girl down below immediately changed in color. The face of the servant girl immediately turned deathly pale, her expression sorrowful. "Our heir, although your servant is of humble birth, but I am still from a clean and clear family. For you to say that of your servant is too ashamed to continue to live, and can only clear my name with death." Her voice had just dropped when her eyes took on a cold glint. Like she was finally liberated, she raised her hand and struck it upon the top of her own head. Chapter 83. 1. The cloven hoof exposed. Qing Yu narrowed her eyes and curled up her finger. A stream of air shot out which struck the servant girl's arm. At the same time, Yan Shicheng had nimbly moved to restrain her. Qing Yu walked over to go right before her and smiled at Yan Shicheng gratefully before she went on to look upon the servant girl who had her eyes tightly shut. "What? You couldn't continue with the pretense and want to be liberated from it by death? Or?" Her alluringly beautiful countenance leaned in close, her light breath blowing gently upon the servant girl's face. "Someone is intimidating you into doing that?" The expression on the servant girl's face turned into shock, her eyelashes quivered a moment as her face turned ashen gray. The answer was known without needing any words. But Qing Yu was not going to let the matter rest there. That would be letting that woman Mo Han Yen off too lightly. She let out a cold chilling laugh and her eyes turned upon Mo Han Yen with indiscernible meaning, which caused the latter to feel a chill run through her. That little slut's eyes felt so strange. Yen Su's gaze was fixed upon the young lady the entire time. Exactly alike. Even the brilliant radiance between her brows was exactly the same, just as eye-catching as that person back then, drawing people's eyes to her regardless of the time or place. The young lady's eyes suddenly turned to look at him. Yen Su was physically taken aback, but her voice then took on a soft and gentle tone, tinged faintly with sorrow. "I had thought that although father is a duke, but he is a father just like one in any family, who loves his own children. Is it because mother is not here? My younger brother's legs are crippled and is unable to walk, unable to live like any normal person. Why do you still want to treat him like this? He's just a pitiful little child." The young lady's eyes then lowered slightly, as she stroked the pale face of the youth in the wheelchair. That pair of eyes that lose its brilliant sparkle in just one instant just wrenched at Yen Su's heart so painfully. Qin Yu. Father promised Mother that you will take good care of us. I had thought that even if we are unable to be like our elder brother and sisters, to live a life of abundance and luxury, indulged and doted upon, we would at least be able to feel secure as this would be home to us, and not have to fall asleep in fear every night, not knowing when we will unknowingly be assassinated in our sleep. Yen Su's eyes flared wide as he stared, as if he did not know that they had been living like this in the manor all these years. And there are people seeking to have them killed. Have all the guards in the Eternal Peace Duke Manor all died? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Yen Shicheng, who was beside him, was looking incredulous and in utter disbelief, their gazes unconsciously shifting to fall upon Mo Han Yen. Those assassins. Did they have something to do with Mother? Mo Han Yen had naturally noticed Yen Su's gaze. The quaking rage in Yen Su's eyes had caused her body to turn cold, and she immediately opened her mouth to stop Qin Yu from continuing on. Ha! That's a really brilliant story you made up. If there were really assassins trying to kill you like you said, then how did the two of you manage to live till today? What utter hogwash! The Duchess has most probably forgotten that I've told you before that a mysterious expert has accepted me as a disciple. Qin Yu said as the corners of her mouth pulled slightly back, to look smilingly at Mo Han Yen, who was beginning to become flustered while she did everything she could to try to cover up. My master took pity on me and did everything he could despite the hardship, to turn the useless trash that I was into what I am today. He even taught me medicine in case I came to be given poison and do not know it. So what? Mo Han Yen said with her brows knitted together, not knowing what the young lady meant with those words. Chapter 83. 2. The Cloven Hoof exposed. So, the Duchess feels that, if things were really as what this servant girl has said, that little Belle has some perverted habit and was acting like a lunatic at that time, to think that with her small and weak little body, she is still able to escape from the room after suffering an entire night of torment, I cannot help but highly suspect her real intentions. After Qin Yu said all that with a smiling face, she looked at the ashen-faced servant girl. Possibly because you do not practice martial arts, and hence you do not know about lightning element wielders all that much. Usually when a lightning element wielder loses their mind or fly into a berserk rage, anything that is alive around them will be struck by lightning and die. Of course there are exceptions to that. If you possess a higher level of power than him, then you can still remain safe and sound. The fact that Yen Su had invited Qin Fang, a former elder of the Faint Mist sect, to come teach his children who were at an opportune age was something that everyone had heard about. Among the few of them, Qin Bei had been most gifted, and was a wielder of the incredibly powerful lightning element. Qin Fang had also said that he was greatly talented with a lot of potential, picking up anything he was taught very quickly, and was very intelligent. If that was really true, then not only had the servant girl not died but was still very much alive here. Could she be a spy who had managed to sneak in among them? If so, she must be much more of an expert than she seems. The servant girl had obviously not expected that things would play out like this, and her face immediately grew a darker gray. Even Mo Han Yen had not thought that there would be such a turn of events. Her nails dug deeply into her palms as her enchanting brows took on an unnoticeable dark glint. Yen Shicheng did not miss the expressions of the servant girl and Mo Han Yen, and his handsome countenance showed a sliver of disappointment. Why is Mother still unable to let it go? Will she only be appeased after she has them completely wiped out? The faces of the people there showed a variety of expressions. However, things have not yet ended. At that moment, the servant girl was then seen slumping weakly down to the floor from having knelt for such a long period of time as her conscience was racked with fear, and a thin sheen of sweat broke out over her temples. Qin Yu arched up her long sharp eyebrows and then said in a light fleeting voice. Anne. Aren't all of you forgetting one more thing? The Faint Mist sect has always been said to be a place that deities live in, noble and pure. And most of the secret martial arts techniques they cultivate requires one to abstain from wine and remain celibate, hence they have never accepted people who are addicted to drink and revel in lusty pursuits. Because of that, unless one is already married and have children, all the unmarried young men and women they take in are untainted and have remained chaste. Can the Duchess then help me explain just what kind of a irresistible charm does this servant girl possess that she is able to make Qing Bei give up on the chance to go to the Faint Mist sect, choosing instead to partake in such improper and illicit affair with her? Once those words came out, everyone present seemed to have suddenly awakened, thinking that they seemed to have completely forgotten about such an important detail about the whole matter. One of the stages in the Faint Mist sect's recruitment trials was to test whether the unmarried young men and women were still chaste, and all the hedonistic and pleasure-loving young masters can forget about wanting to be accepted. So it was rumored that all in the Faint Mist sect were a bunch of deities who does not even eat the common food of mortals. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Eumo Han Yen was at a loss for words, unable to think of anything to say in rebuttal. In all honesty, no matter what kind of a reason it is, it will sound a little far-fetched. As who could possibly choose to not want the opportunity to be accepted into the Faint Mist sect just for a moment of pleasure, by willingly destroying their body's chastity? Unless that person was a mindless fool. At that moment, even Yen Su finally came to realize that something wasn't right, and he slammed his large palm hard onto the arm of his chair. Because he had exerted too much strength, the chair's arm cracked in a few places while his voice was icy cold and filled with an oppressive aura. What an audacious lowly servant! You even dare to slander your master. Tell this duke here the entire truth now. Who sent you here as a spy, and who is the one pulling the strings behind? If you do not confess everything here today, with the methods this duke uses to deal with military convicts, I fear a little girl like you will not be able to withstand it at all. Chapter 83. 3. The Cloven Hoof exposed Yen Su had stormed through countless battlefields all these years, and the blood-stained aura on him was no joke. With just a slight raising of his voice in rage, his words made the little servant girl whose last line of mental psychological defense was already on the verge of breaking completely collapse at that moment. Spare me my life, your highness. Your servant. It was all just my own wishful thinking, and I was blinded by greed, not content to submit myself to a fate of being just a lowly servant and to be at the beck and call of people. So I decided to spike the second young master's medicine. Those words seemed to be an attempt at heaping all the blame for the crime upon herself. It was not known what kind of a hold Mo Han Yen held in her hand over the little servant girl that made her not dare to reveal the mastermind behind the plot even when she was shaking like a leaf in terror from Yen Su's shout. Ha! Letting Mo Han Yen escape calamity so easily. Not possible. The mirth in Qin Yu's eyes deepened further, and she then said in a rather admiring tone. It looks like this servant girl is also highly skilled and knowledgeable in medicine. Otherwise, how could she possibly know to use such a common drunken immortal flower to be mixed with drugs that cause hallucinations, that makes people lose their mind and become incredibly aroused? With an abrupt turn in her words, she suddenly swung around to look at Mo Han Yen, saying each word with a slight pause in between, seemingly not bothered by the venomous glare staring back at her that was as sharp as steel blades. I heard that the Duchess has always loved flowers, and the several pots of drunken immortal flowers in her backyard are absolutely gorgeous, their fragrance nose-tingling. But although drunken immortal flowers are absolutely beautiful and enchanting, they are however harmful to the body. The Duchess must remember to take care of your health. What do you mean by that? Are you insinuating that this Duchess here is the one who instigated that little servant girl to go harm others? Mo Han Yen was looking like she had been so wrongfully accused and was questioning her in indignant rage. The Duchess' words caused Yen Su to be rather surprised, thinking that Mo Han Yen might be overreacting a little. Duchess, Qin Yu is merely just throwing out guesses and has no intention of suspecting you at all. Do not take it to heart too much. It might be because Qin Yu really looked too much like that person and Yen Su had unconsciously just jumped to her defense. Hearing that, Mo Han Yan's face immediately changed. The countenance that had been maintained to look as pretty as a young lady was tinged with a little bitterness and looked rather pale. Her beautiful eyes brimming with tears, she said, "Is your highness blaming me now? Or are you saying that you believe that young lass words and think that I am an unscrupulous and venomous evil witch who would not stop at anything?" Mo Han Yan was General Shang's most beloved youngest daughter, smart and intelligent, ravishingly beautiful. Seeing her looks now, one would be able to see the kind of enchanting poise she must have possessed when she was younger. She had married Yen Su when she was 14 and had come to bear him a son and a daughter, both with outstanding looks, and extraordinary talents, whom Yen Su had always been exceptionally proud of. With their affinity of more than 20 years as husband and wife, deep down in Yen Su's heart, he still loved her. If he had not met that person, he always thought that his heart would never have changed. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. From what he still remembered, she had always been a gentle and dutiful wife, never throwing any kind of tantrum, but just only that one time. It had been because he had brought that person back. She had been hysterical back then and he could still clearly remember how she had looked back then. That had been the only time, and right after that, she had then moved out from the main house, and her character had changed into one that he could not fully comprehend. But with her expression looking like she was silently enduring her aggrievement and on the very verge of tears, it made his heart soften again as he felt that he still owed her all these years. Yen Su sighed lightly. This duke does not mean that, but just feel that the entire matter isn't as simple as it seems on the surface. Then what does your highness mean then? Mo Han Yen said, her gaze looking icily at the young lady down below. With her insinuating and shadowy words, isn't she suspecting that it is this duchess here that is manipulating the whole thing behind? This duke will naturally not any false accusations, not will I allow the mastermind to get away scot-free. Yen Su said in a gentle voice, trying to appease and calm her down, getting her back into her seat. Chapter 84. 1. You can stand up already. Qin Yu watched with amusement at the exchange between the two of them, not really surprised at the attitude Yen Su was taking. Her alluring fox-like eyes narrowed as she looked at the servant girl that was restrained by Yen Shicheng. There should be a chastity granny in the manor who will be able to inspect her body right. I would have to trouble father to summon the granny and have her check the servant girl's body, and see if she is still a virgin. Yen Su's brows furrowed up. You mean to say that she is still a virgin maiden? It doesn't count when I say it, or the Duchess will say that I am just spouting nonsense later. Qin Yu said with a shrug of her shoulders, the smile on her face highly meaningful. The servant girl was taken out from there. The granny who would check her body was the nanny who had always been looking after Yen Su, a person who could be trusted. Very soon, the granny came shuffling in. She looked to be about 50 years of age, with faint wrinkles on her face that was friendly-looking and highly benevolent. Greetings to His Highness, and Duchess. Dispense with the formalities, granny. What's the result? Yen Su asked. The marks on that lass body shows that she has indeed suffered severe torture, and there were even marks from whipping and biting, frightening to see. Granny recalled what she saw earlier, and her heart was mournful. What a pitiful child. Yen Su's eyes darkened and he was just about to open his mouth when the granny spoke again. But, although her injuries were serious, her body is still complete and untainted. What did you say? Mo Han Yan's eyes stared wide and round. Have you made a mistake in your inspection? Duchess, my old humble self was also in charge of inspecting the ladies in the imperial palace when I was younger, and I have never made an error. Although the granny was a little displeased, but she still replied highly respectfully. Mo Han Yan shook her head in disbelief. How is it possible? How could she still be untainted? Why should that be impossible? Little Bei had not done anything to her at all. Qin Yu said as the ends of her mouth curled up. Not to mention that his body is just starting to make a recovery and he will not have the energy to do something like this. Moreover, he had also received pointers from my master and is now able to practice cultivation. With such prodigious gift, how could he possibly do something that would harm his body's energy essence just to torment a servant girl? With the switch in her tone of voice, she turned the spear point straight onto Mo Han Yen. But why is the Duchess getting so highly worked up? You said that the entire matter has nothing to do with you in the slightest. Why don't you ask the other concubines whether they believe that? Mo Han Yen quickly turned herself around to look at the bunch of ladies who had come here just to watch the show, every single one of their gazes filled with suspicion, and tinted with contempt. Her gaze then slowly shifted over to look at Yen Su, only to discover that the man she had loved for 20 over years was looking at her with a complicated kind of eyes, which chilled her heart like a tomb. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. But no matter what, she needed to maintain her last measure of composure and dignity. Mo Han Yen pushed down and restrained her emotions against all those many pair of eyes, like she did not feel the surrounding animosity and the eyes looking at her strangely at all, as she said in an emotionless voice. Even if the servant girl had exaggerated her words and made it such a big deal, the injuries on her body cannot be faked. Yen Qingbei must have used violence but was unsuccessful, and his carelessness allowed the servant girl to escape. As a young master of the Eternal Peace Duke Manor, and he has done such a shameful thing to a servant, he should still be punished. Even at the point where the truth was already almost as good as having been fully revealed, the woman Mo Han Yen still refused to let Qingbei go, doggedly insisting on making an issue out of the injuries on the servant girl's body. Qin Yu did not say anything but just lifted the corners of her mouth scornfully. Thereafter, just as everyone were flabbergasted as their eyes stared at the scene before them, the weak and pale-faced youth then stood up from his wheelchair before all those pair of eyes. At the moment the youth stood up, the air around him and his demeanor changed in an instant, his dispirited person suddenly disappeared, his eyes turning icy cold. Chapter 84. 2. You can stand up already. If I had really done anything to a weak and defenseless servant girl, I will not be so foolish to let her live and give her such a great hold over me. The youth's cold and emotionless voice slowly startled everyone out of their astoundment from seeing him stand up. The youth who had always looked so frail and thin had not stood up before for all these years. Hence, when they found out for the first time just how tall and towering his body's frame really was, almost as tall as Yan Shicheng, at the very moment that he stood up, he seemed even taller than he really was for an instant. May I ask, when I am really fully mobile like this with full use of my limbs, would she possibly have a chance to escape at all? Qingbei said contemptuously, his handsome long narrow eyes glinting sharply as he swept his gaze over to the servant girl on the ground, whose face had gone deathly pale. Yen Su stood up from his chair with shock in his eyes, and said in disbelief, Qingbei, you can stand up already? I have been able to stand on my feet from a long time ago. Qingbei said with a malevolent gaze as he looked at Mo Han Yen. If you had not hatched a plot like this against me this time, I will not show I can stand before everyone so early. All the suppressed emotions held down within the youth for so long seemed to explode out at that moment. All the pressure built up from the maddening rage threw out an oppression that even Yen Su had felt a little oppressed. 10 years. Mo Han Yen, I sat in a wheelchair for 10 years. Crippled for 10 whole years. It was not enough that you broke both my legs, and you wanted to completely destroy me this time. Are you seeking to make me be a failure who will not accomplish anything, one whom no one would know or even hear of my entire life? The youth's tall figure slowly approached closer one step at a time, his cold unfeeling voice spat out from his mouth, every single word crystal clear. Both the face of Mo Han Yen and Yen Su changed a shade. This matter had always been a secret in the Eternal Peace Duke Manor. Back when Yen Su had found out about this, although he had been filled with rage, but to protect his reputation, he did not want news that the Lady of the Eternal Peace Duke Manor could so heartlessly do such a cruel thing to a young child to spread. He had just told people that Qing Bei had been too playful, having accidentally fallen off from a tree while playing, and had broken his legs. In the main hall at that moment, besides the royal concubines and ladies of the various courtyards, there were all tens of servants present. When they heard that astounding piece of news, they all immediately blew their tops. What? So the second master did not fall and break his own legs? Can you believe how selfish and narrow-minded the Duchess is? How could she do such a thing to a little child? The second master said he had been in a wheelchair for 10 whole years. Then doesn't that mean he was only about 4 or 5 when? No wonder none of the ladies in the manor dared to give birth to a son all these years. Besides the heir who is birthed by the Duchess, all other children born are girls. The second young master is the only other son, and he had mysteriously become a cripple back then. Now, she is even seeking to destroy his future completely. You really can't tell a book by its cover. The Duchess looks to be such a gentle and virtuous wife on the surface. The most terrifying ones are people who are always wearing a smile on their faces, but their hearts are always thinking of venomous ways to harm you. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Qing Yu's corners of her lips raised up in an arc, revealing an indiscernible smile. It must be known that the most scary thing was slanderous gossip, which often could force a person back into a helpless corner. Now everyone knew Mo Han Yan's real person. The gentle and virtuous image she had built up and maintained for so many years collapsed in that instant. There was no need for Qing Yu to do anything else. With so many pairs of eyes, ears and mouth here today, unless they were all silenced, otherwise someone was bound to leak it out. All those people were carefully discussing in hushed voices on the surface, but who among the Duke's family had not cultivated martial arts before? Hence they all possessed astounding hearing, and moreover, Mo Han Yan herself was one who possessed a significant level of cultivation. Chapter 84. 3. You can stand up already. The servants were all taken aback in horror, the concubines and ladies avoiding her like she was a venomous serpent. A dark and sinister aura exuded from Yen Su's body, and all of that heavy and oppressive power was directed straight towards Han Mo Yen. But at that moment, she was acting like she was not bothered by everything at all. She suddenly laughed out loud, and when she raised her eyes, everyone saw that cruelly ugly face that had shed off its mask of false pretense. So what if I had been the one who did that to you? She spat out those words viciously, without any fear of consequences, and like she did not care anymore. This woman is actually admitting to it. Just as everyone was feeling dubious of her real intentions, Mo Han Yan suddenly broke into wild laughter like she had gone mad. What right does a bastard child like you have to live in this world? You should have died long ago. Both of you should have died by right. Yen Su was greatly shocked by her words. By the time he realized that something didn't feel right, Mo Han Yan had already spat out all the aggrievement she had kept hidden in her heart without a care in the world. The Duke was the one who let that shameless woman come in here, and she gave birth to you 2 illegitimate bastards from her illicit affair with some other unknown man. It was retribution that she died so early. At that moment that Mo Han Yan was screaming out loudly, Yen Su caught her unawares when he reached his hand out and struck her on the back of her neck. Mo Han Yan immediately fell limp and slumped back into her chair. Qing, your mother has gotten too worked up and is spouting nonsense. Bring her back to her room to rest. Yen Su said in a deep voice. Yen Shicheng had still been immersed in the version of truth that Qing Bei had said and had not awoken from it. Hearing Yen Su say that, he then woodenly held Mo Han Yan in his arms and carried her out. But those words that Mo Han Yan had said earlier was already causing everyone there to find it hard to digest and react to it. In this Duke's manor, just how many secrets were there that they were completely unaware of? Yen Su swept his gaze over the people below who had strange expressions on their faces. His eyes then glinted sharply as he ordered. All the things that you've heard here today, forget every single word of it without any exception. If this duke is to ever hear the slightest whisper about this outside, you will not be shown any mercy. Everyone's heart quivered and they all immediately chorused. Yes, your highness, your servant, lady, does not know anything. You're all dismissed. Yen Su said as he closed his eyes feeling thoroughly exhausted, waving his sleeve at them for them to go. In the next instant, the enormous hall emptied out and only 3 people. Yen Su, Qin Yu and Qin Bei were left in there. After a rather long while of deathly silence, the clear soft mirthful voice of a young lady sounded. Doesn't father have any sort of explanation he wants to give us? Regarding those words the Duchess said earlier, I do not believe that it was all just nonsense she spouted out in the heat of the moment. Yen Su's brows knitted up slightly, and that good-looking face could not defy the vestiges of time as it showed a moment of weary sadness. His gaze looked deeply at the young lady's exquisitely beautiful countenance and his voice turned a little hoarse as he said, You really look very much like your mother. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qin Yu was taken aback a moment. This was seemingly the first time she had heard Yen Su mention her mother. Do they really look that alike? Your mother was a very gentle woman, but her heart was incredibly strong-willed, seemingly good to each and every person, and nobody seemed to be good enough for her. Yen Su said with a bitter laugh, overcome with emotion. Hence, how much I envied the one person she had really loved, and how fortunate he was. When I saw her for the very time many years back, I was never able to forget her. When I saw her again, she had already become someone's wife, and was already with child. Yen Su said softly, looking like he was going to come clean on everything with them. Chapter 85. 1. Hidden secret from back then because Qin Bei had already told her before when he had accidentally overheard Yen Su and Imo Han Yan's conversation, where he had come to know that they were not Yen Su's biological children. So when he was telling them that, the 2 siblings were not all that surprised. At that moment, Yen Su looked like he had fallen deep into the thick and blurry past. I did not know why she was all alone when she was with child. I asked her about it before, where the child's father was, but she did not tell me. Yen Su heaved a deep sigh when he spoke of that, his gaze filled with endless regret. I just cannot imagine when such a woman was carrying a child in her, how could that man just let her remain out there all by herself? She had been so proud back then, and to think that she would fall to such a fate. If I had not insisted that she stay in the Duke's manor to take care of her while she was pregnant with you, I fear that the 2 of you might not have safely descended onto this world. Qin Yu and Qin Bei just listened quietly, never having ever expected that their mother would have such a thing happen to her in her past. That she had been pitifully left to wander, without a fixed place to call home. And where had their so-called father gone to? The man that had moved the heart of their proud and strong-willed mother, to make her willing to carry her child for him. Where was he? Although she had not told me who that man was till the end, I could feel that she really loved him. Yen Su said softly, his gaze becoming gentle as he looked at the pair of siblings who looked so much like each other. And also the 2 of you. Your names were given to you by your mother. Qin is your mother's surname and her name is Qin Fei. Qin Fei. Qin Yu unconsciously muttered out aloud. So that was what their mother's name was. I have neglected the 2 of you all this time for so many years and I have broken my promise I made to her back then. She had been too cruel to me, and also too cruel to her flesh and blood. Yen Su's voice was a little choked up and he held both his hands up, covering his face, like he was struggling to stop the tears surging up within. Back when she was in labor, the granny taking care of her said that she had mistakenly taken abortion-inducing medicine that would cause her to bleed profusely and it would kill her if left untreated, though Mo Han Yen had played a part in that. But right after that, she then suddenly disappeared without a trace. I was devastated with grief and had wanted to give her a proper burial for her to rest in peace, but she had not even left her dead body behind. No one knew of this matter as everyone who was involved in it were all secretly disposed of by me. I am telling this only to the two of you. Qin Fei's grave is empty and it is only a memorial. Although I do not know where she had gone to have abandoned even her own flesh and blood, there is one thing I am very certain of. She did not die. She had never told me where she was from because she did not want to implicate me, but her cultivation was highly profound, and also a high-leveled elixir cultivator. I have a feeling that she might be intricately linked to the highest level realm, the legendary Cloud Heaven. Qin Fang told me that the two of you possess extraordinary gift which is even more outstanding than Ning Er's, and I was thinking that this shows that you two are indeed the children of that woman, Qin Fei. If the two of you have the opportunity to go to the top-level realm, you may then find some clues towards finding your mother. After Yen Su came clean with them on everything, the feelings of the pair of siblings were rather heavy and complicated. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. After they went back to the tranquil abode, they did not bother with the stunned faces of the servants when they saw Qin Bei walking his way in, but remained somber and silent for a long time, the air hanging around them stifling and depressing. If their mother was still alive, then what kind of secret was hidden behind this? From what Yen Su said, since their mother loved them, why had she left without a single word, and left her children into the care of an outsider? This was something that they did not understand, nor was it something they could accept. Little Bei, do you want to go to Cloud Heaven? Chapter 85. 2. Hidden secret. From back then it was not known how much time passed, but the setting sun could be seen aglow outside. The sky was ablaze with a fiery red, looking exceptionally brilliant. Qin Bei's lowered lashes moved and he then opened his mouth to say, "Yes, I want to, and I need to. But I know that I am still not strong enough now, so before that, I shall strive to make myself stronger, to possess enough power to go see Mother." "You will." Qin Yu said, ruffling the hair on his head. "And I'll always be by your side." The youth's eyes were warm and gentle, as he looked at her sentimentally from under her palm. "And now, I no longer have to hide from others by pretending to be crippled at last. That woman Mo Han Yen has revealed her true self, and I fear that despite having pretended to go into seclusion for cleansing cultivation for so many years, she would now really need to go into seclusion for real. Otherwise, once she steps out through the doors, she will surely drown from everyone's spit." Hearing the youth's words, Qin Yu was slightly surprised and she retracted her hand as she asked in puzzlement, "When I came back, there was a very thick scent of drunken immortal flowers and you should have been affected by the drug. Haven't you recovered a little quickly from it?" And when she had seen him in the main hall earlier, he had clearly looked completely listless and dispirited. Qin Bei raised up an eyebrow and gave a rather devious smile. "I had indeed fallen under the drug's effects, but a larger part of it was feigned. Such low-grade poisons and drugs can't do much to me at this point already." "Oh. And why is that?" "The credit for this goes to Little Snow. It had sucked out the toxins in my body for 3 whole years and I am always together with it all the time nowadays. Over time, I discovered that my body's constitution had changed quite a bit and I have built up a certain amount of resistance against drugs and poisons." Qin Yu was highly taken aback by what she heard, like she had never thought that such an amazing thing could happen. This was really a blessing in disguise, and she then said as she shook her head helplessly, "Then you must really thank Little Snow properly. That toad has really earned great credit this time." "Of course. When it comes back after it has finished playing outside, I will personally go catch a big large jar of worms for it to eat," Qin Bei said, his face shining with delight. Little Snow was a 1,000-year-old ice toad and it drinks only dew and feeds on fresh flowers. "You want to go catch a whole jar full of worms? Are you serious?" Night fell, and Qin Bei had been studying very intently into the modified lightning summoning palm manual recently. After Qin Yu gave him some pointers in a few areas, he had immediately come to comprehend its contents, and he had been able to deduce even further into it to invent an even higher level palm strike, which caused Qin Yu to be greatly pleased. Upon the table, the tiny little snow toad just sat there, its mouth croaking like a drum like it was eating something. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Only upon closer inspection would one see that there were round lustrous white jade-like elixir pills that numbered as many as several tens on the table. The little fella was almost smacking its lips as it ate the pills one at a time, seemingly highly satisfied as it ate. It was great that it was with an elixir cultivator as its mistress. It had all these high-grade elixirs every day that it could eat like little candy sweets, which not only filled its stomach but also increased its spirit power in cultivation. All these years, Qin Yu had reared little Snow into becoming a toad with such tender flesh and silky smooth skin, and it could very well be said that it was one of the prettiest-looking toad there was around. Qin Yu shook her head helplessly and she walked over to poke at the little creature's abdomen. In the end, it nearly choked on an elixir from the sudden provocation and very nearly couldn't catch its breath. It then glared balefully at its mistress with its round and googly eyes. "Wah! Why did you stab me in the stomach out of the blue? Don't you know you might have become a murderer of a toad like that? TSK. You're glaring at me." Qin Yu was amused by its expression and she went on to poke at its soft stomach once more out of curiosity. "You are just such a tiny little fella, how can you eat so much? You have already eaten more than 100 pills of these elixirs in one sitting and aren't you afraid you'll stuff yourself to death? More importantly, do you know what you ate is actually several 100,000 taels of gold here?" Chapter 85. 3. Hidden secret from back then. Croak, what are gold tails? Toad doesn't like to eat gold tails but loves to eat their sweet tasty little candies. Little Snow blinked its eyes in innocent ignorance. All right, go ahead and eat them all. I'll go sleep first. After you finish eating you better go catch all the mosquitoes and you are not to sneakily jump into my bed, understand? Qin Yu said with her eyebrow arched up slightly, and then put on a threatening smile on her face to continue to say, "If I come to find that you jumped up into my bed, I'll have red braised snow toad to eat tomorrow." Little Snow's tiny body unconsciously trembled pitifully and another elixir pill slid down its throat into its tummy so smoothly without thinking. It croaked a couple of times and was still quivering slightly as it finished up the several more elixirs before it then went into a small corner, trying its best to reduce its presence. What is this red braised snow toad? Why does that sound so terrifying? On the other side Mu Chi was doing everything within his power to use his glib and irresistibly honeyed tongue before he finally managed to convince his own cold and heartless sister who was more than a handful to deal with to go save a person. It was after all a member of the three great sects. Although the internal departments might not be made aware of this, but they should still establish good relations with them on the surface at least, and he would also have the most powerful assassination temple hidden behind the carefree valley come to owe him a favor. No matter how you looked at it, this matter was highly beneficial to him. But what they had not expected was that the entire matter would be so thorny. According to what one of the 10 great assassins, Feng Qi had said on the day when he had come to look for him, that brother-in-arms of theirs could not live in dark and damp places or his condition would worsen. But as the assassination temple was situated within a valley, the air was highly humid and hence they had shifted him into a courtyard in the capital's suburbs. The light was much better there and the place better ventilated. Feng Qi and his men had naturally gotten other elixir cultivators to come have a look before, but those people had not even been able to make themselves get close to the patient before they all went running away from that strange condition that they had never seen before. Hearing that, Mu Lai snorted derisively through her nose, thinking how could those people even consider themselves to be elixir cultivators? Aren't they afraid that they are bringing shame upon the name of elixir cultivators? Her nickname as the Demoness was not given to her in vain. Although she was a girl, she was more resolute and decisive than a lot of men in her ways and actions. She was also gutsy, having tamed a ferocious and malevolent spirit beast when she was just 4 years old, born to hold great power, where she felt no fear even upon encountering such a massive beast that had devoured countless lives. Many men outside greatly admired this young lord of the Mu family, and hence Feng Qi and his men greatly believed in her and were filled with anticipation to see what she could do. The group of several people rode horses for slightly more than an hour before they finally reached their destination. "This is the place," Feng Qi said to the two of them, as he got off from his horse first. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Mu Lai was dressed in her usual full unfeeling black battle clothes, her figure very tall, giving people a sense of power and security when being with her. She lifted one leg slightly and then flipped herself off her horse agilely. Mu Qi then got off his horse behind them and followed them to make his way inside. It was very serene and quiet inside the courtyard, a great place for recuperation and rest. Feng Qi was in front as he led the way, saying as he walked, "We will really be troubling young Miss Feng greatly this time. Our brother has been afflicted with this tormenting condition for a few months already, and we hope that he can be alleviated from his suffering this time. Since I've come here, I will definitely do everything I can to cure him," Mu Lai said indifferently. Feng Qi smiled, seemingly consoled, and just as he was about to say something, a maniacal and painful roar suddenly came out from inside the house and his face immediately changed. Chapter 86. 1. Dark Sovereign Snake, Chief. "Don't torture yourself like that anymore. Stop doing that," a good-looking youth with a smooth and fair complexion exclaimed anxiously. When he had come back, he had paced about in the surrounding area a few times but had not dared to go forward. The few other people beside him were also at a loss on what to do, their faces looking highly conflicted. What made it more terrifying to see was a tall and large figure standing by the window. From the light shining inside, it projected the shadow of countless black snake heads weaving madly upon the window, seeming to occupy a good half of his entire body that was continuing to spawn at a horrifying speed. Sharp hissing could be heard intermittently, and a malevolent-looking snake's head then bore out from inside his body, through flesh and blood. That could no longer be called a human, but a monster whose body had been taken over by countless snake heads. That man held a sharp sword in his hand, the expression on his face looking like he had gone a little mad as he swung the blade repeatedly to slice off those snake heads, like it made him feel just a tad bit better. But every time he cut them off, those snake heads would turn into a pool of blood once they hit the ground, to respawn at an even more maniacal speed. Those snake heads had not suffered damage from his actions, but it just made him become even more weak, as those snake heads materialized from his own blood, and what he was doing was merely injuring himself further to make himself gain a moment of consolation. "Chief, don't hurt yourself like this anymore." Feng Qi had gone to bring the Mu family of elixir cultivators young Miss Mu to come treat your condition. "You will be able to recover from this very soon," the good-looking youth said with his face all creased up. Another burly and muscular man with coarse hard looks also said in a deep voice, "Ah Jean, you are the main pillar of the Assassination Temple. For the sake of the Assassination Temple, you've got to pull yourself together. You are such a proud man, how can you possibly lose your mind over this mere snake poison?" The man who had a good half of his body all covered with snake heads and his eyes red had an unbelievably agonizing expression on his face. Because of the excruciating torment, he had bitten through the skin on his lips and blood was trickling down the corner of his mouth. Together with those snake heads weaving madly about, anyone who was a little more timid might very well die from fright at the sight. Snake poison. This isn't snake poison. The man had his teeth tightly clenched together as he paused between every word, and his voice, which was low and raspy, sounded filled with despair, broke out in laughter. "No one will be able to save me. No one can." He was talking like he knew something, his body exuding the scent of death, harboring absolutely no hope of surviving through this. There were countless times that he wanted to end his own life, but his brothers in arms who had gone through life and death with him had not once given up on him, trying all ways and means to save him. It was already midnight and it was time that people were all sound asleep, but a particular courtyard in the capital's suburbs was brightly lit with lamps. If not for Feng Qi's explanation that the strange affliction relapsed only at night, Mu Lai would not have rushed her way over here at the expense of her sleep. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. And having just stepped inside, they had already heard that agonizing roar, which caused Feng Qi to reach the room at an extremely fast speed. Ah, Jean, young Miss Mu has come. Feng Qi, dodge quickly. Almost at the same moment that the door was opened, a dark shadow filled with sinister malevolence shot right straight towards his face. Feng Qi's eyes widened as he stared, and before his body even reacted, something tightened around his waist. A soft whip had coiled around his body which brought him away to safety. That black shadow then fell onto a patch of grass in front. Under the light from the moon, he saw the patch of grass that had been thriving suddenly turn into dark ash, rotted away. Chapter 86. 2. Dark Sovereign Snake. A chilling shiver ran through Feng Qi unconsciously, and he went on to say with trepidation in his voice, "Thank you, young Miss Mu, for lending a helping hand. If it wasn't for the fact that Mu Lai had coiled her whip around him and brought him out of harm's way, it was feared that he would now have been reduced into a set of skeletal bones already." "No problem." Mu Lai narrowed her eyes. If she had really seen what she thought she did, it had looked very much like the head of some sort of a beast. In that instant that it had fallen to the ground, it had turned into a pool of blood which then rotted away a whole patch of grass. When the wind blew over that rotted patch of grass, a strange smell then spread into the air. The expression on her face changed and she quickly shouted, "Cover your nose and mouth quick, and hold your breath." Mu Qi and Feng Qi, who were right beside her, immediately did as they were told. Upon hearing that, Mu Lai took out 2 elixir pills and said to them, "Eat it. They are antidote pills." She was an elixir cultivator and had always been fiddling with herbs and medicines since she was very young, developing her sense of smell to become highly sensitive. Poisons that attacked one's body through smell wouldn't have any effect on her, but it was different for most other people. Even a little bit of the smell could possibly deliver a lethal strike upon them. Just what kind of a poison was this that it was so powerful? Mu Lai's gaze stared icily into the room that was now open, and he could see several tall male figures standing stiffly in there. And under the flickering candlelight, the image of a horrifying figure was projected on the paper of the window. It looked like a man with a very tall stature, but the figure was tall in a rather unusual way. Right at the top was a thick and massive snake's head with its jaws wide open and spitting out its long forked tongue, its eyes big as bronze bells that flashed with an evil red light. "What is that thing?" Mu Qi's eyes were wide as he stared, his face growing slightly pale as looked at the massive and indistinct figure projected upon the window. Feng Qi also stood there in a daze, stunned in place completely. That thick and powerful-looking snake head hissed menacingly, and its brutal and tyrannical power sent everyone in the room flying away. Those men were all part of the highly mysterious 10 great assassins who possessed profound cultivation, but they were at that moment like flies who were unable to retaliate at all as they crashed heavily to the ground, and they all vomited out a mouthful of blood. The man inside who had been overtaken by devilry had at that moment lost all his rationality. "Feng Qi, bring them away," one of the men said as he struggled to stand up. His voice weak as he continued to say, "Ah, Jean is no longer rational and has lost control of his body. Do not let the assassination temple's affair implicate the innocent." Inside the room was a tumultuous bout of chaotic roars as the towering figure revealed its real identity. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. The man's face was fully covered with the snake scales, his red eyes filled with ruthless and malevolent murder. Half his body was human and the other half was filled with a nauseating writhing bunch of black snake heads. And right above the top of his head, the leading snake head stood poised, its blood-red, large bronze bell eyes staring excitedly at the bunch of men before it. Spitting out its forked tongue, it then let out a highly raspy voice that grated on the ears to say, "So much highly nourishing food. The expression on everyone's faces changed. This abomination is actually capable of human speech. That was an ability that only spirit beasts above the 8th grade can possibly possess. Could it be? Just as they were all silently making their own deductions, a cold and scornful voice sounded suddenly, the female saying in a highly indifferent tone, "What are you?" I have seen many spirit beasts who have yet to attain their physical forms, but this is the first time I am seeing one that's like you, such an audacious monster that dares to try to forcibly take over a human body. The leading snake head looked taken aback before it then weaved its head in the air, lowering itself down to get a better look at her. Its raspy voice sounded highly amused as it said, "What an interesting little doll we have here. To think that you are not afraid at all. This is my first time encountering such an interesting soul, and I think it will increase my spirit powers by quite a lot after I devour you." Chapter 86. 3. Dark Sovereign Snake. Unfortunately for you, that is just wishful thinking on your part. Mu Lai's eyes narrowed up. According to ancient texts, massive body forms depict weakness, and seeing that your image is still so light and faint, I think you are not any kind of spirit beast but have just inherited a bit of the shape and form of some spirit beast with someone controlling you from behind the scenes, and that is how you possess such power and is capable of human speech. The sovereign of all snakes lives by absorbing human blood and reproduces at an alarming rate at night. Moreover, their blood harbors lethal poison which can corrode all living things. You are the king of all snakes, and you are manipulating all the rest to invade this flesh body, and after they have completely taken over it, you will then possess a human body for yourself. Mu Lai's words had not only caused the men from the assassination temple to be highly shocked, but it had also made the massive snake head widen its eyes as it stared at her, its expression looking rather startled. A pity this human flesh body's willpower is too powerful, and you still have not managed to succeed in conquering it even after wearing it down for several months. Mu Lai lifted up the ends of her lips chillingly. Ranked second in snake black magic, the Dark Sovereign Snake. I wonder if what I say is correct. The enormous snake head narrowed its eyes and flicked its forked tongue out. I can see that the little doll is not all that ordinary. To think that you know about my origins. Hiss. But all of you are destined to die here today. Upon saying that, it had already made the body it had occupied initiate an attack, sending out tens of flying snake shadows with a lift of his hand. Everyone immediately dodged in a flash, where the snake shadows then fell into a pool of water, instantly turning the water in the pool an inky black. "Sis, what do we do? Are we really going to leave our lives behind here today?" Mu Chi said a little mournfully. "It's all my fault. If I had not gone to seek your help to save this person, you would not have been dragged into this. Now things have come to this. No need to mention saving anyone, we can only pray for someone to save us now." Mu Lai's soft whip whizzed through the air at amazing speed, and she said as she dispersed those snake shadows, "I have only come across such snake black magic in the medical texts within the Mu family's library, and it did not mention in detail on how to break the spell. So I will only be able to suppress this and not uproot it completely." "Then aren't we all finished then?" Mu Chi's face looked like it was going to cry, almost filled with despair. A moment's distraction almost caused him to be struck by those snake shadows, which frightened him into focusing his attention on the situation at hand, and not dare to be distracted anymore. The men from the assassination temple were feeling rather guilty that they had dragged the two people into this, and hence they did everything they could to shield the siblings, thinking to let them retreat. This was after all something that had gone beyond anything they could have expected, and there was no need for them to offend an elixir cultivator family on top of that. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, young Miss Mu, we have been thoughtless this time and have implicated both of you into this. We are very thankful that you were able to come forth to lend us your assistance, but you should go ahead leave here. Feng Qi came in close to say. Mu Lai shook her head with her brows creased up. I can see that the Dark Sovereign Snake has its murderous intent elicited and would not let me off so easily anymore. If I am to leave now, Not only would all of you be killed, but it would be so excited by the slaughter it would have carried out here that it would go running on a rampage of massacre out there. The imperial capital is not that far away from here and it would cause the people great alarm. Then what should we do? Is the assassination temple going to disappear from the face of these lands henceforth? Feng Qi said with a saddened sigh. Mu Lai's gaze darkened and she then muttered in a low voice, "If I am able to find that friend of mine, maybe. There is still hope for us. She knows a lot about black magic and curses and is above me in terms of knowledge in medicine." Feng Qi dodged the shadowy snake attack and struggled to answer. "Is that really true? Where is this friend of yours now?" Chapter 87. 1. I came to get reinforcements. When that was brought up, Mu Lai seemed to become a little depressed and was slightly angry. "I do not know where my friend is, and besides a name, I know nothing else." Feng Qi was at a loss for words. "Young Miss Mu, are you serious? After filling my heart with such great delight thinking that we will soon be saved, you are now actually telling me that you do not know where this friend of yours is. This must be how it feels when one goes from being up in the heavens and falls into hell." Mu Qi, who was not far away from them, also choked upon hearing her reply. Was his sister kidding here? It must be said it would be a rather lame joke if she was, and it really wasn't that appropriate a moment for jokes, was it? They were all here right before the jaws of life and death, and can you not crack jokes at a time like this to try to liven up the atmosphere? Seeing their faces all filled with pure and utter despair, like she had just committed the most unpardonable crime, Mu Lai's temple twitched and she said through tightly clenched teeth. "I really only know just the name. She is called Qing Yu, and throughout the entire lands, besides that god of slaughter in the Water Edge Kingdom who is surnamed Qing, no one else has that surname." Maybe she had even lied about her name. Mu Qi was a little further away and had not heard that very clearly but faintly heard Qing something being mentioned. He then subconsciously asked, "What's the name again?" "She's called Qing Yu." In the tranquil abode, Qing Bei had just come to comprehend a new realm in the lightning summoning palm. He was feeling highly happy and was in exceptionally high spirits, so even when it was already very late, he did not feel the slightest bit of lethargy. Just as he was going to tell Qing Yu the good news, his ears moved slightly when he heard the sound of movements that were rushing towards them. It was probably due to the advancement in his cultivation that his hearing had become more sensitive than before. The handsome eyes narrowed. It was already so late. Could it be that that woman Mo Han Yen still has not given up on getting rid of them and she had sent assassins to come kill them? Heh. His hands were just itching and he had had nowhere to vent. The door of the room further in rattled as it was opened. Qing Bei was taken aback a moment. "Sis, you have not gone to sleep yet?" The white clothes on the young lady was neat and tidy without a single crease in them, her eyes were clear, without the slightest hint of grogginess, like a person who had just woken up. "With them kicking up such a great din, it's hard for me to not wake up," Qing Yu said darkly. She was already about to go to sleep but had then sensed the irregular movements before she gave up on that idea, wanting to see what sort of demons and monsters were creeping in. Qing Bei was a little surprised when he heard that. He had only sensed those faint movements because his cultivation had advanced so very quickly, and here she was saying, "Kicking up such a great din. Looks like the disparity between them is still very great." Qing Bei lamented to himself with a sigh. Seeing that the people who were seeking to barge into the tranquil abode had already come into the courtyard and were already right behind the door, Qing Yu arched up an eyebrow and the points of 3 golden needles glinted sharply and chillingly in the dark room. But the strange thing was, the person was suddenly standing outside the door and did not move. It was a good while before the person stretched out a hand and knocked on the door. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qing Yu exchanged a glance with the equally puzzled Qing Bei. What kind of a situation is this? A change in tact. Courtesy before using force. Based on the rule that I do not move when the enemy remains still, the person outside the door did not move and the siblings naturally remained still as well. But in the very next second, the person outside actually stuck his hand onto the door and pushed experimentally on the door to open it. At that same moment, the gold needles on Qin Yu's fingertips shot out. The person outside the door was in fact Mu Qi, whom the men in the assassination temple had fought valiantly to shield and protect to allow him to escape. When he heard the two words Qin Yu that Mu Lai had said with her own mouth, he had thought that he must have heard wrongly. The Demoness and Qin Yu were two completely different kinds of people and were worlds apart from each other. How could they possibly come to know each other? And it was said they on rather good terms. Chapter 87. 2. I came to get reinforcements, but when Mu Lai started to describe that the person was a highly alluring young lady who looked devilishly handsome when disguised as a young male youth, Mu Qi immediately thought of that person, that one young lady who had moved his heart. He could still remember that awkward and slightly embarrassed expression she had back on the night he had uncovered her disguise. Now that he had come here again, Mu Qi was feeling rather conflicted in his heart. But he did not have time to think much about it, as the sound of air being torn through coming straight towards his face made him subconsciously feel danger, causing him to leap at lightning speed to dodge to one side. However, the speed of the golden needle was just too fast and one of them scratched his cheek, causing a drop of blood to flow out. "It's you." Upon seeing who the person was, Qin Bei's eyes widened in surprise. "Isn't this the man who came here to the tranquil abode previously to confess his feelings to Qin Yu? And it seems like he is also the dethroned sixth prince. What is he doing coming to the tranquil abode at this time of the night? And doing it so sneakily at that?" Qin Yu was also startled for a moment, looking like she had never once ever thought that the intruder was not an assassin, but Mu Qi, whom she had pranked once before, and she immediately reacted. "Are you all right?" Her needles were coated with poison and she hoped that he had not been struck by them. Mu Qi shook his head. "It's just a scratch. I'm fine." Qin Yu tossed him a little porcelain bottle. "Take the antidote just in case anyway. Although the wound is tiny, the potency of my poisons are not." "Thanks," Mu Qi said as he pulled out the bottle stopper with his teeth, poured out the pill inside and took it. The discomfort that was just surging up them then faded away by quite a bit. Qin Yu lifted up her phoenix-like eyes that were shining with interest as she looked at the rather wretched-looking young man measuring him up. "What happened to you? Did you get into a fight?" The young man smiled bitterly. "It wasn't a fight. It was a bashing. To think such a thing can happen." Qin Yu crossed her arms, and said in a calm and unruffled manner, "And you came to my tranquil abode in the middle of the night seeking refuge?" The first time they had met, this fellow was being pursued by killers and his body succumbed to poison, coming to fall among her herb beds. "No. Qin Yu, I came here to ask for your help to go save people. We are running out of time. Can I fill you in on the details along the way?" Mu Qi said, his expression looking rather flustered as he spoke. Although the villa in the capital's suburbs was not that far away from the Eternal Peace Duke Manor, he had still taken a good amount of time to get here, and that was after he had executed the light step skill to shorten the time by quite a bit. "Save people?" Qin Yu was taken aback. "Now?" "Yes, now. Time waits for no man. Every moment wasted here will put them all in increasing danger." The young man who always had a mischievous smile on his face and rebelled against conformity had a stern and serious face at that moment. "They are fighting someone who is afflicted with the Dark Sovereign Snake Curse, ranked second in Snake Black Magic. His body has been overtaken to the point that his mind is no longer clear and he currently on a rampage of slaughter. My elder sister said that only you are able to dispel this snake black magic and I only barely managed to escape being shielded by all of them. If you do not go save them now, any delay will cost them a few more lives." Lives were at stake. Qin Yu retracted her smile. "Give me just one moment." Seeing her dig through a whole pile of bottles and flasks, Qin Bei pressed his lips tightly together and asked in a soft voice, "Do you need me to help?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, no need for that. Little Bei, you just remain here in the manor. In case anything unexpected happens, I do not want you to get hurt. Qin Yu said without even raising her head, before she then quickly stood up and went walking outside. Please be careful. Seeing that, Qin Bei did not continue to insist, but just called out to her in reminder. Don't worry, I will be fine. Qin Yu gave him a reassuring smile, and then leapt out over the back door of the side courtyard. At that moment within the villa in the capital's suburbs, the entire place was in complete disarray. Chapter 87. 3. I came to get reinforcements because the shadowy snakes the dark sovereign snake shot out were highly corrosive. Everyone was forced into a passive situation, constantly dodging. Moreover, that was the body of their comrade, and before they have ascertained that he could no longer be saved, they could not make themselves harm him in any way. Chief! Wake up! Do not allow the monster to control you anymore. A good-looking youth dodged to the side and a shadowy snake brushed his clothes. The cloth immediately rotted away a little. A little bit more and it would have hurt the flesh underneath. His body subconsciously broke into a bout of cold sweat. He just had a close brush with death and just managed to escape by a hair's breadth. Looking at the hideous-looking man whose face no longer showed any humanity, the young man's face grew red-rimmed. To think that the man who was so powerful and had always fought shoulder to shoulder with them all in the past, would finally fall into such a state now. Why must fate be so cruel to him? Ah Jean, have you really given up already? Didn't you say that you will make the Carefree Valley take the top position among the 3 great sects one day? Didn't you say that as long as you still live, the Assassination Temple will forever exist? Are you going to admit defeat? The burly and muscular man with coarse hard looks swung a punch towards the massive leading snake head. The explosive force caught the snake head completely off guard and its vision and mind blurred for a minute. At that same moment, the body of the man with the red-rimmed eyes quivered and his mind was restored to clarity for a moment. He saw that every single one of his brothers were all in such a wretched shape, all of them carrying significant injuries, the expression of their faces in agony. The leading snake head was currently in another bout of frenzy as it battled for control of the body. The thousands of tiny snake heads weaving and swaying vigorously as they struggled, like 2 separate consciousnesses were locked in a tumultuous fight, both seeking to gain the upper hand. Arg arg, kill me. Just kill me. The man's tall and slender frame suddenly fell down into a kneel, his hands clasped around his head in a pitiful and mournful wail as blood tears fell from inside his eyes, a hopeless and terrifying sight. Kill me. Kill me now. Ah Jean, don't think you can be rid of me. Such a great shell of a body will finally become mine. The snake head said in haughty arrogance as it broke into a series of maniacal laughter. Mu Lai gripped the soft whip in her hand tightly and her eyes darkened. It's too late. Looking at the situation, even if Mu Chi manages to find the person, it is feared that the man would not survive. Seeing the man in such torment and agony, a sense of hopelessness rose up in Mu Lai's heart for the first time. She was an elixir cultivator but she was not able to do anything to save this man who was suffering such torturous pain in front of her. After another bout of agonized and rage-filled roars, while still under the control of the leading snake head, the man suddenly raised up the sword gripped in his hand, and he viciously stabbed it straight towards his own heart, which stunned everyone at the scene. Ah Jean, stop it. Damn you human. You dare to seek your own death. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Among the raging roars between the leading snake head and everyone else from the Assassination Temple, the faint sound of a soft tinkle rang out almost unnoticeably. The sword in the man's hand was struck and sent flying out of his hand, and the leading snake head let out a loud and deafening roar as the thick cluster of tiny snake heads let out a series of agonized hissing. The sound of light footsteps then sounded inside the villa. Everyone turned around to look, and they all saw a young lady in a pure and untainted white dress, who seemed like she was treading upon the silver-white light of the moon on the ground, her exquisite and alluring countenance fair and mesmerizing as it reflected the moon's rays, a slight smile hanging from the edge of her lips, her demeanor so leisurely she could very well have been taking a stroll in her own courtyard at home. And with the approach of the young lady, the massive lead snake head suddenly cried out in pain, and the tiny multitude of snake heads started to shrivel and fade away, at a speed that was highly alarming to everyone. The young lady arched up an eyebrow. Why are you running away for? Chapter 88. 1. He's not human. It was so clear to see that it was such a pure and harmless smile, but what that massive and malevolent-looking lead snakehead saw was a smile that was as terrifying as hell. This human young lady. Just who is she really? How could she possibly possess such a powerful and oppressive aura? From the moment that she appeared, the lead snakehead started to feel a kind of fear that burned from deep within its soul, making it feel so frightened that it immediately wanted to seek to flee and scatter. But at that moment it was as if it was trapped within that shell of flesh, and no matter how hard it tried to struggle, it was still unable to escape. With the unbelievably fearful roars and the helpless struggling from the lead snakehead, the other smaller snakeheads were all also hissing incessantly in terror. And the moment the young lady appeared, a series of events that happened caused everyone to be stunned in their spots. She looked to be merely only slightly over 10 years of age, so frail and weak-looking. But that extraordinary air she commanded was impossible to disregard, a kind of nobility and power that she seemed to be born with, that every single one of them just unconsciously accepted and became irrecoverably convinced to believe. The young lady in her white dress slowly came in closer to the monster of a man who was covered with countless snake heads, the enormous lead snake head's almost ephemeral bronze bell-sized eyes widening as it stared at her. The tinier snake heads below were so terrified they all drooped down, not moving an inch, except for a slight timid trembling, almost a little adorable to look at. Qin Yu did not find it funny and said inwardly within in an emotionless voice. "Enough, little burro. Stop fooling around. It's almost frightened to death by you already. That's a little too shameless. With the oppressive aura of a divine artifact of the lost ancients like yours, how can an insignificant shrimp like this possibly withstand it? Aren't you bullying the weak here?" Zhang Mai sneered in contempt. Okay. Who's trying to scare them? So timid and they dare to come out and commit such a deed. This is just the low-level lands after all. If it had gone to the high-leveled lands where divine beasts above the 10th grade roam all over the place, it would be crushed in a second without even a speck of it left behind. Qin Yu would naturally not have the ability to cause the lead snake head to be so helplessly frightened, and the key to that was the fella inside her body instead. Although it was a weapon spirit, the amazing thing was that Zhang Mai was an extremely rare divine beast weapon spirit. Its original form was an enormous golden rhino python, of an absolute emperor grade among beast types, and he had come to encounter a similar species today, so in terms of grading alone, he already overwhelmingly quashed the dark sovereign snake. This person is a little strange. Zhang Mai said suddenly in surprise. What is it? Qin Yu asked as she turned to look. At that moment, the man was probably had his spirit energy completely depleted and had fainted, but looking at the features on his countenance, his flesh features did not look too bad. But, is there something wrong? He's not human. The golden-haired youth spat out those words with clear certainty. Qin Yu was a little confused, and could not react to it for a moment. Huh? What did he mean? By not human? Mistress, do you know why that thing wants to take over his flesh body? Zhang Mai said as he clicked his tongue a couple of times, like he had just discovered something interesting. Inside this man. Half of his blood's lineage is of the snake tribe and the bloodline is of a rather high grade. This is why he has drawn this thing in, and I think it has coveted this flesh body for a long time, but had not succeeded all this time because the power of the man's bloodline was too strong. It must have been in a situation when the man was in a very weak and frail state that it was able to take advantage of the lapse. Bloodline of the snake tribe? Qin Yu was a little surprised. Then is he and little Yi. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Since the beginning of time, the wolf tribe and the snake tribe had always been mortal enemies. So, should she save this person? Mistress, when this man's bloodline fully awakens in future, his ability will not be below that of that kid, Qin Yi Li's. He might come to be of use to you. Zhang Mai then opened his mouth to suggest. Chapter 88. 2. He's not human, I didn't think so much into it. Saving a life accumulates more good karma than erecting a 7-story pagoda anyway. Qin Yu muttered helplessly, and then crouched herself down. The ephemeral shadowy lead snake head had probably been so terrorized by Little Burrow's oppressive aura that it had lost all ability to defend itself, that it gave up on struggling any further, and it was merely just waiting for death to come. It knows its own situation at least. Qin Yu curled up her lips, and a ball of golden red flame suddenly burned in her palm. She then formed a claw with her fingers and she clasped it over the man's spirit heaven lid, right on the top of his head. The men from the assassination temple on the sides went pale with shock. Before they could even react, they saw the young lady retract her palm and her other hand quickly taking out a small transparent porcelain bottle. She hit the mouth of the bottle once and then immediately stoppered it. The series of actions had all happened within a very short period of 2 breaths' time. Everyone then turned to look at the bottle in the young lady's palm and saw a tiny ball of golden red flame inside swirling incessantly around a pitch-black creature that was long and thin like an earthworm. And upon the man lying on the floor, all the countless densely packed snake heads had already disappeared without a trace, without any of them noticing it at all. Besides the blood covering his body all over, he had finally come to look like a human once again. Qin Yu raised an eyebrow and looked at the speechless and flabbergasted men who looked like their souls had departed from their bodies before she said with a light laugh. His body is all right now. You can take him away and clean him up. Let him soak in a bath with this as well. Upon saying that, she then tossed the bottle containing the little earthworm in her hand to Feng Qi standing right at the front. He caught it instinctively and then stared at the writhing creature which had turned all red from being burnt before he asked, "What is this?" Qin Yu could not help but smile. The Dark Sovereign Snake's original form. Snake voodoo. Hearing that, Feng Qi almost threw the bottle right out from his hands in shock, and he turned his wide-eyed gaze to stare at her. Soak in a bath. With this. You have not heard me wrongly. Soak it in his bathwater. I have already refined it with elixir fire, and it is now a form of medicine, which will now absorb the remaining toxins out of his body. It will become useless thereafter, and it can be gotten rid of after that. Qin Yu went on to explain. Thank you, miss, for lending a helping hand. I wonder who the young miss is. Feng Qi had not even finished asking when the sound of a flurry of hurried footsteps reached them. Mu Qi came running in, panting heavily. How is it? It was only after he came in that he discovered that the man who had looked like a monster had reverted to his original state and the atmosphere was unbelievably quiet. All settled. Qin Yu looked at him, gasping heavily for breath, and her phoenix-like eyes raised slightly. I asked you to come with me, but you refused. Are you tired? How would I know if you really meant it? Mu Qi lamented with a mournful face. Earlier, when she was coming out from the Eternal Peace Duke Manor, after Qin Yu ascertained the location, she had asked in suggestion that she could bring him along to pass through dimensional space, which would save him quite a bit of time. Mu Qi had instead given her a "you've got to be kidding" look, indicating he did not believe a word of it. The skill of passing through dimensional space was something that only people from the high-level lands were capable of, and a very rare few in the middle-level lands possessed that ability. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. And unexpectedly, she had actually just disappeared from right before his eyes. Mu Qi then felt that from the moment he came to know her, he had been constantly witnessing amazing things. Divine skills in medicine, mysterious and unfathomable methods employed, high-level skill like passing through dimensional space, and he does not know how many more secrets there were. She's an absolute freak. Hearing the grouse-filled tone in his voice, Qinyu looked at him without any expression on her face. I never make such superfluous statements. Mu Qi immediately wanted to vomit blood in that instant. She's so unbelievably self-assured. Chapter 88. 3. He's not human. Could you be the friend that young Miss Mu mentioned about? The elixir cultivator with exquisite skills in medicine. When Feng Qi saw Mu Qi come in following right behind and the two of them were acting like they were familiar with each other, he was able to immediately guess the other party's identity. That's right. That's her. Another cold and emotionless female voice rang out. That was when Qinyu then noticed the person in black battle clothes, a tall and slender-figured lady. She had been standing with her body slanted sideways, and now that she had turned her body, her face could now be seen fully. That face wouldn't be considered to be all that outstanding and could even be termed as ordinary-looking, inconspicuous when placed among a crowd. But she was born with a pair of extremely beautiful eyes that rippled with autumn waters, sparkling and enchanting, which only lent an added outstanding quality to her otherwise rather plain countenance. Demeanor cold and distant, who looked highly arrogant, hard for people to get close to. But it was that haughty air and demeanor that made Qinyu remember who that person was. Her haughtiness was different from Yan Ning Luo's cold indifference that made her seem like she did not even consume mortal food, but it was as if this lady had been born just like that, so proud and aloof that she could not bother herself with anyone at all, like no one was even worth her paying them any notice. Hence that unlikable personality caused her to have bad affinity with people, where she could not claim to have any friends that she could even talk to at all. But people with this kind of personality were also highly extreme. Either they viewed everything with nothing but contempt, but when they cared about a particular person, they would dig down deep into their hearts and offer everything they had to the person, regardless of what it would cost them, they would do it with no regrets. Because for people with such a personality, a close friend was hard to come by, and anyone that they came to care about, was extremely rare to them as well. She had said that she did not have any friends, but for Qinyu, this was the only friend she recognized as her own. Qinyu remembered that it was roughly about 4 years ago when she was still cracking her head on how she was going to treat little Bei's legs. The polar core fire was something once could chance upon but never to seek. She had almost scourged through all the most terrifying and dangerous places throughout the lands, and it was one of those times that she encountered a bunch of people being attacked by a rarely seen 7th-grade spirit beast. She was only 10 years old then, and the oldest one among that bunch was about 18. She still remembered how the bunch of people had wanted to draw the attention of the 7th-grade spirit beast away for them to escape, and they had dumped a little young girl there. She had initially not wanted to stick her nose into other people's business, but when she saw how weak and frail that little young girl was, but her eyes burned with an indescribably vicious bloodthirstiness even when the spirit beast was 100 times larger in size. She did not stop fighting the beast despite the fact her body was all covered with wounds that were bleeding freely. Upon seeing that she was finally about to be completely drained out and devoured by the beast, and Qinyu had thought that the little girl had given up on struggling, the little girl then used every last ounce of strength in her body as she tensed up, driving the dagger hidden in her sleeve down in a vicious thrust that stabbed the massive beast blind. That completely infuriated the enormous beast, and its sharp claws reached out, about to tear her to shreds. It was right in that instant that Qinyu was moved by the little girl, where she moved to rescue the little girl from under the massive beast's claws. She shot the golden needles coated with lethal poison she carried on her into the beast's body, and its gargantuan body then suddenly crashed to the ground, killed by poison. Qinyu bandaged the little girl's wounds, and all throughout that, the little girl's clear and cold eyes did not leave Qinyu at all. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. She then said, "Those people are my siblings from the family clan I grew up in. When I tried my best to protect them, they all then turned around and used me as prey, abandoning me completely. Besides my father, no one has ever treated me as nicely as you have. From now onwards, you are a friend of Mulai's, my one and only friend." One and only friend. Qin Yu was taken aback by the serious tone of the little girl's voice a moment before her mouth then split into a smile. "I am highly honored. My name is Qin Yu." Chapter 89. 1. Incredible secret. She still remembered that it was at a spirit beast's lair in the northern part of the constellation lands. Since the beginning of time, divine Lingji herbs was always closely guarded by a spirit beast, and Qin Yu had also gone there to try her luck as well. After she saved Mu Lai, they had spent about half a month's time with each other. But due to some strange series of events, they encountered a beast stampede. It was not known what kind of a terrifyingly enormous creature could have caused the many thousands of beasts to become so agitated, which then kicked up a powerful sandstorm. Qin Yu was caught off guard for a moment and was immediately pulled into it. By the time she landed, she suddenly found herself in the White Fen Land's border, where she then came across Lu Junyao and his gang, and she successfully seized from their hands a high-vintage polar fire core that was filled with robust spirit power. For many years after that, Qin Yu did not meet the little girl again. After all, besides her name, she knew nothing else about the girl. As she was highly focused only on her cultivation and did not pay much attention to worldly affairs, she was not aware that after Mu Lai escaped from calamity, Mu Lai sent people to search for her in that place for 3 whole months. When no news resulted from the search, Mu Lai was depressed for a long while, and she became even more cold and aloof. Now that they saw each other again, with the changes over 4 whole years, the puerile countenances of the two people had blossomed, far different from the way they had looked when they were younger. But there were certain people that you do not need to judge by the way they looked, as the extraordinary flair and incomparable grace they carried just drew people's gazes upon them unconsciously. There was no doubt that both Qin Yu and Mu Lai belonged to such a group of people, ones who possessed that special and unique flair. The first time they met, the little girl's dressing had been highly unsuited for one at her age, so dark and somber in all black, making her highly unapproachable. But Qin Yu knew that the little girl had an extremely soft heart. Qin Yu then blinked her eyes and said in a soft and gentle voice, "Lai Lai, it's been a long time." The body of the cold and indifferent girl in black clothes suddenly stiffened a moment, and the ears hidden beneath her hair reddened almost unnoticeably. That affectionate term used to address her. That was the name she was called by, Lai Lai. Even her father had not called her by such an affectionate name. From that year that they lost contact, no matter how long had passed, she firmly believed that the person was still alive, but was just in a place that she did not know about. Although so many years had passed, she had never once forgotten that such a person existed, the one whom even when she was abandoned by kin from her own clan, had rescued her from right under the sharp claws of that spirit beast. The one who had bandaged her wounds, the one who had stayed together with her in that dangerous and pitch-dark lair of the spirit beast. The one whose back was shown to her unguardedly, and when food was found to ease their hunger, she was the one who ate first. The one who took care of her when she was wounded, the one who kept watch while she slept. It had been clear that that person was a little girl younger than she was, but had moved her heart completely, to care for someone so much, and to like so much. And at that moment, that one person was right before her eyes, smiling at her. Mu Qi was sensing the strange atmosphere in that scene, seeing that the expression on his older sister's face did not feel right. Just as he was suspecting that some dispute because of love or hatred had happened between them before, he suddenly saw Mu Lai's body move, to take a few steps forward, before she stretched her hands out and grabbed Qin Yu in a big hug. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Mu Qi's jaw almost dropped. She hugged her. Mu Lai was very tall, the kind that could gaze over all the heads of others among females, so when she embraced the similarly tall Qin Yu in her arms, although she was just about half a head taller, she looked to be clearly taking position of the elder sister in that scene. The two people, one in white and one in black, just stood them locked in an embrace, and it was hard to describe, but it felt like they were kind of a well matched. Chapter 89. 2. Incredible secret. Mu Qi was taken aback by his own shocking thought, and he quickly shook his head to shake off that messed up thought in his head. Doesn't Qin Yu already have someone she likes already? And he had even met him before. It was a very handsome-looking and highly powerful man, so he was certain that there was no problem with Qin Yu's sexual orientation. But as for his elder sister, he really did not dare guarantee it. For that strong and dominating woman, where men were weak as chickens in her eyes, she was much more manly than men around her. There was no need to mention the women. To her, they were all just a bunch of frail and weakly white lotuses who plotted and schemed pretentiously against each other to get ahead. She hated those weak and dainty little ladies the most, and if they come to encounter her on a bad day, she would not hesitate to speak with her fists. He had never seen Mu Lai show anyone polite courtesy, needless to mention such intimate action. So, could the person that Mu Lai really likes be Qin Yu? The expression on Mu Qi's face was utterly horrified, and he had never thought that he could be so sharp. He seemed to have discovered a very incredible secret. Suddenly being embraced, Qin Yu was stunned for a moment as well before she then said softly with a smile, "Have you been well?" The scene felt strangely familiar. Why did her friends seem to like using an embrace to express their delight and excitement in their hearts? Hearing that, Mu Lai released her and her gaze stared deeply at the young lady with her exquisite featured countenance. "So, you are a daughter of the Duke of Eternal Peace." No wonder she had not been able to find a single trace no matter how hard she tried. She would never have thought that the young lady would really be from the Eternal Peace Duke Manor. "I had not thought that the young miss of such a famous elixir cultivator's family would be Lai Lai. You're really very good." Qin Yu smiled and said, her eyes two smiling arcs. But after Mu Lai heard that, there was no hint of a smile on her face. Her eyes dimmed as she looked at Qin Yu. "Famous? Are you mocking me? If I was really so famous, then why have you not come look for me before? You must not care all that much for a friend like this, right?" Those words were clearly said in a calm tone and without any traces of emotion, but Qin Yu could still detect a sliver of sadness and aggrievement. Qin Yu then sighed slightly. "After that time, I was brought to the White Fen lands, and it took me a good half-year of floundering before I managed to come back. The recovery of my younger brother's legs was also going through a critical stage, and we had to defend against rounds of scheming and assassination plots one after another. I really could not pull myself out of all that at all." About Qin Yu's younger brother's condition, back when the two of them just got to know each other, Mu Lai had come to know about it, aware that he was a youth with quite an unfortunate fate in life. So hearing Qin Yu mention that, she could not help but ask, "How is he now?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, he can already stand up. Back when I came to land in the White Fen lands, I actually came across a superior grade polar fire core. That kid then received fortuitous luck out of misfortune, where not only were his legs cured, his meridians were cleansed and boosted, to turn into a prodigy from his wrecked and ruined body. Qin Yu shook her head as she said with a smile, comforted by the great fortune of that silly little fella back home. Mu Lai raised her head up slowly. "That is also sweetness that came only after so much bitter suffering." After saying that, she then remembered something and raised her eyes up to ask, "In the selection trials of the sects that are 6 months away, have you made any decisions about that?" Qin Yu was a little surprised by Mu Lai's question. Both Little Bei and I will be going to the Faint Mist sect." "What a coincidence," Mu Lai said as she raised an eyebrow. "I am also going to the Faint Mist sect, but I am not interested in their selection trials at all." I need the faint mist sect spirit spring water to help me break through to become a golden grade level elixir cultivator. Qin Yu nodded her head in understanding and then smiled. Then that means that I will have another companion at that time. Chapter 89. 3. Incredible secret, great, then it's agreed that we'll meet there. Mu Lai said as her gaze deepened. This time, I will not be unable to find you anymore. Qin Yu could not help but be speechless and to laugh helplessly. On the side, Mu Qi watched how the two of them were chatting away merrily and he was already numb from the shock. To think that the haughty and arrogant woman could really have such a gentle side to her. He was almost blinded by this absolutely incredible sight. But there was one thing he was even more certain of. The person Mu Lai liked was definitely Qin Yu. The good-looking face was twisted up into a ball. Should he be kind-hearted and go remind Qin Yu? She was after all someone he had liked before, and although she did not like him back, but having caught Mu Lai's eye. That was a really very dangerous thing. On the other side, Mu Lai was instead waving for him to go over, her demeanor showing a rare moment of amicability, where even her icy face that would not change in 1,000 years was now showing a faint hint of a smile. Ah, Qin Yu is the only friend that I recognize, and she had saved my life before. But how did you two come to know each other? Mu Lai had not forgotten that he had been the one who suggested that he would go find Qin Yu. He had never thought that the person she had not been able to find for so many years had just been found by him. But Mu Qi had been in the Limitless sect all this time and just came out occasionally once in a while. He would always either come back to the Mu family to see his father or go look for his friends for drinks. So how had he come to know Qin Yu? Mu Qi had not yet responded when Qin Yu said helplessly with a light laugh, I really have quite a strong affinity with you siblings. He had a bit too much to drink before and fell into other people's treachery, where he fell in my courtyard gravely poisoned. I saved him. And extorted 1 million in gold out of me. Mu Qi then said, as he cast a mournful glance at her. Hearing that, Mu Lai snorted derisively and her face turned contemptuous. Do you know how high Qin Yu's level is as an elixir cultivator? The elixirs she cultivate are of full and complete purity, without the slightest contamination of any impurities. Almost not a single elixir cultivator in these lands is able to achieve such a perfect level of purity at all. Do you that if one of her elixirs is taken out to be sold in the black market, it will be a loss at 1 million in gold? Mu Qi was speechless. So he has earned from this? But he had only made just one statement. Sis, aren't you being too highly protective here? And look clearly here. This is your younger brother, you are saying that too. Don't you think you are defending the wrong person here? Qin Yu could not help but laugh as she watched the two siblings squabbling with each other. She then looked out at the sky and saw that it was nearing the dawn as the colors were just about to change. As the people from the assassination temple had been too worried about their comrades' injuries, they had immediately taken Ajahn back to his room upon hearing Qin Yu's instructions, cleaning out his wounds and putting him in the bath to absorb the poison out of him. Mu Lai and the rest spoke for a while out there and they then went together to check on the man's condition. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Because he had to soak in the water for a good 4 hours, the man was still in the bathtub as the steam rose around him. His eyes were closed and his face had become a little rosy from the comforting heat. After the malevolent and horrifying-looking snake head that had invaded his body was now gone, it could be seen that the man was actually exceptionally good-looking. The exquisite features on his face did not pale in comparison to a woman's, eyes deep-set, his stunning brows extending almost to his temples, the kind of man that captivated people with just one glance. It was not known just how stunning those eyes would be when they were open. But the most attractive part of that face was at the edge just below his left eye, where there was a black floral blossom barely the size of a fingernail, small and petite. Even though it was so tiny, the layers of its petals could be seen, its shape highly unique, a species that had never been seen before. With that black blossom under his eye, it gave him an added sense of devilish mystery. Chapter 90. 1. Divine-level assassin. People born with extraordinary facial physiognomy usually exemplifies propitious signs in their lives. Like Yen Ning Luo, who was born with a violet abyss bloom on her forehead, was determined that she was destined to live the life of a phoenix, her future deemed to reach unmeasurable heights. They were also some born with fiendish signs, their lives doomed to encounter many calamities, set to bring misfortune upon their closest kin. And this man before their eyes, despite his set of handsome facial countenance, had, because of that black floral bloom below his eye, looked evil and devilish. With all her travels across the lands, the things Mu Lai had seen and heard were naturally more than Qin Yu, who did not care about anything that happened in the world around her. When Mu Lai saw that unique bloom on the man's face, the expression on her face was slightly startled, and she then opened her mouth to ask in surprise, could this man possibly be the one right at the top of the assassin's ranking chart, the soul summoner, Shi Zhanchen? Once those words came out, the men from the assassin's temple were all taken aback a moment, never thinking that she would actually know Zhan's real identity. Shi Zhanchen. He is really Shi Zhanchen. The highly powerful pugilist known as the only divine-level assassin throughout the lands. At the back, Mu Qi's face was one of stupefied shock, his tone of voice highly agitated and excited, like he had just seen a famous person he greatly admired, unable to contain the joy bursting out of his heart. That is Shi Zhanchen right there. And the mysteries surrounding him and his level of powers were in no way inferior to the Duke of Vast Seas at all. But compared to the overly mysterious Duke of Vast Seas, there were just too many rumors about Shi Zhanchen going around. This notorious and infamous divine-level killer of the Assassin Alliance, was a target that all assassins highly revered and worshipped. One could count the number of missions Shi Zhanchen had taken up after he became famous with just the fingers on one hand. Based on just the number of times he had taken up missions, one would be able to see just how high a price he commanded. Unless it was an exceptionally difficult mission that no one else was able to undertake, or he would never accept the mission. And he had never once failed. The name Soul Summoner had stemmed from how anyone whom he set his eye on, would all die a premature death within 24 hours without exception, and just before their deaths, they would suffer such extreme shock and terror that their souls left their bodies, his ways and methods unfathomable. The most shocking rumor was that he was once contracted by a great entity to assassinate a highly respected and senior-ranked clan elder from the White Fan lands for great family clans. It was said that the target was a few full levels above him in cultivation, but he had completed that impossible mission without any pressure. The amount of commission paid by the contractor at that time was rumored to be 80 million taels of gold and 100 superior-grade spirit beast core crystals. That kind of remuneration paid had really sent all the assassins into shivers. That was the divine great level indeed, and they could only watch feeling inferior, knowing they would never be able to attain that. I would not have thought that the chief mastermind of the assassination temple is Shi Zhanchen. Mu Lai was also a little surprised, and she then asked in puzzlement. But he is such a powerful man, how did he? It was impossible to imagine that the man who had looked neither man nor ghost and had lost his mind to a maniacal rage earlier was this same man here. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu Feng Qi glanced at the man in the bathtub who had his eyes tightly shut and let out a sigh. We do not know what happened either. Unless Zhan has accepted a mission, otherwise he would not step out of the assassination temple in most circumstances. He had previously shown some occasional signs of dizziness and double vision before, and we had thought that he was merely too tired, never thinking that the situation would become worse and worse to end up like this, to the point that many elixir cultivators did not even dare to treat him. Qin Yu asked with a slight smile, I heard that he assassinated a person from the White Fan lands for great family clans. I wonder if it was from the Nangong family clan. How does the young miss know? It was a matter that was only known internally, and it was a secret to people outside. How did this young lady know that it was someone from the Nangong family clan? Mu Lai also looked at her in surprise, her eyes seemingly questioning. Chapter 90. 2. Divine-level assassin Qin Yu raised an eyebrow and her gaze dimmed as she said, I went to the White Fun lands by accident once before and stayed there for about half a year's time, so I know quite a bit of that place. Among the 4 family clans, only the Nangong family clan are skilled in black magic and voodoo arts, adept in rearing and in cultivating creatures used in curses. Every single one of their people has a voodoo insect implanted in their bodies from birth and they accompany their host in growth. If their hosts come to meet with a premature death, the voodoo insect would follow the order given by their hosts just before they die to take revenge upon the culprit who killed the host. After her voice fell, she then paused a moment as her gaze glanced at the black-colored bloom and said in a meaningful tone. He is rather fortunate in life. He was merely afflicted with snake voodoo, and to him who was of the snake tribe's bloodline, it wouldn't cause him much harm, but just momentary torment and would not risk his life in any way. After hearing her explanation, the men then came to understand. The gaze of that handsome young youth then darkened and he said in a cold voice, those people from the Nangong family clan are really vicious. They made the chief suffer so much torture. The day will come that we will make them pay back in folds. With this matter regarding Zhan, we hope that the few of you will keep in secret. After all, there are many people vying voraciously for his life and it will be very dangerous for him before he makes a full recovery. Among the men, the burly and towering figure of a man took a step forward, to say in a stern voice. Don't worry, none of us here are blabbermouths. Moreover, Mu Lai's gaze then glanced at the man in the bathtub as he said slowly. Shi Zhanchen is one of the very few people among assassins that I rather admire. Assassins were known to everyone in the world to be people that were heartless and merciless, cruel and bloodthirsty. But Shi Zhanchen was a man of strict principle. He would never strike against the weak elderly, women or children. Using his words, it meant that a killer should never strike the defenseless, as that would only insult the weapon that held in their hands. Dawn was breaking and the few of them did not tarry much longer. Although the men from the assassination temple tried their best to ask them to stay, that they must wait till Shi Zhanchen regains consciousness to thank them personally, they were still rejected. Just before they parted, Qin Yu subconsciously glanced at the blossom just below Shi Zhanchen's eye and it was not known whether it was due to a moment of hallucination but she seemed to feel that the flower that had originally only bloomed halfway had actually blossomed further, looking even more devilishly beautiful. Next day, although she had not slept the entire night, but just meditating for the span of a half day in her dimensional space would wash away all feeling of exhaustion and sleepiness for Qin Yu. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Hence she had woken up just as early as always that day, when the leaves and petals in her herb beds were still covered in morning dew, pristine and crystalline with exceptional beauty, looking highly robust and thriving with vitality. Mo Han Yen had not come out to move about ever since the last incident and she had probably already given up completely. To avoid all the strange gazes from everyone else, she had seemingly come to a complete rest. But she would most definitely have sent word to Yen Ning Luo and added lots of spice in her letter so that when Qin Yu went to the Faint Mist sect, Yen Ning Luo would surely seek revenge for her mother which would ensure that Qin Yu's life in there would not be dull. The training in the wilderness that Qin Fong had arranged for them was set to happen in the next few days and when Qin Yu recalled back about the place she had gone to survey a few days before, she felt that the mosquito and bug problem there at night was highly important. In order to not let herself be bugged to death and be unable to sleep throughout the night, Qin Yu specially made several herb bags that would kill the bugs and mosquitoes, so that she would not have to fear that problem. If all those revered elderly elixir cultivators came to know that she had used her exquisite knowledge in medicine to cultivate mere bug killers, they would surely be snorting till their beards bristled and stare at her angrily while admonishing her of the ignorant use of knowledge and a complete waste of talent. Chapter 90. 3. Divine-level assassin on the other side, Mu Lai had returned to the Mu family and only dozed for slightly more than 2 hours when a servant came bright and early in the morning to pass word that the family head wanted her to go to the front hall. After Mu Lai came in rather late, she was stunned for a moment when she saw 2 good-quality black sandalwood boxes placed in the front hall before she asked in bewilderment, "What are they?" The Mu family head, Mu Qing Tian, was seated up upon the main seat with a gentle and refined face. Although he was already about 40 years of age, but that countenance still looked exceptionally young and good-looking. He looked at Mu Lai's surprised expression that was quite rare to see and could not help but shake his head in laughter. "I was going to ask you just when did my precious daughter become the Carefree Valley's benefactor?" Carefree Valley? Mu Lai arched up an eyebrow, unable to react in that instant. "They were sent here by the Carefree Valley early this morning and they specifically said that they were thank you gifts for the Mu family's eldest young Mississippi." Mu Qing Tian opened his mouth to say, and then signaled to a servant at the side to open the boxes. Mu Lai's gaze turned to look and saw an entire box of glittering gold pieces, and that the other box was filled with countless beast-type spirit cores. Such shocking generosity, it even astounded Mu Qing Tian. But the Carefree Valley's people had not even waited long enough for him to refuse the gift. The person who delivered the gift had immediately left without giving him any chance to do that. Underserved remuneration without merit. It was like a hot potato in Mu Qing Tian's hands and he had immediately summoned Mu Lai in for questioning. Mu Lai's eyes glinted and she then said indifferently, "I merely happened to save someone from the assassination temple and this is probably the reward they are giving in return." That last Qin Yu was used to concealing herself and if she did not want anyone to find her, no one would be able to find any trace of her. The assassination temple had most probably been unable to locate her and they had then sent these things here to her instead. Hearing that, Mu Qing Tian's face looked a little concerned. "I see. You must not come to have any close links with these people from the Carefree Valley. To the people out there, they are an unorthodox sect and our Mu family have always steered clear of people from the sections." "Father, I understand." Mu Lai replied. "But I have been stuck at the Elixir Cultivator's silver level 8th grade and that is why I need to make a trip to go to the Faint Mist sect in half a year's time for the sect selection trials. I intend to fight to break through to the gold level in one go." Mu Qing Tian nodded his head in satisfaction. "It is good that you have such strong resolve. Among the Mu family's younger generation, we are all depending on you. In the Mu family currently, most of the younger juniors possess only average talent. Besides Mu Lai whom he is highly proud of, none of the young men and ladies from the branches of the family were outstanding which just made Mu Qing Tian unable to help himself but to sigh at times, fearing that the Elixir Cultivation family clan would fall into decline with that generation. Towards Mu Qing Tian's depressed demeanor, how could Mu Lai possibly not know what he was thinking in his heart? She patted him lightly on the shoulder and said, "Father, rest assured. I will bring the Mu family to glorious new heights together with you. The Elixir Cultivator family clan will not fall into decline forever." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Mu Qing Tian nodded his head, comforted by the words. Here on the other end, after Mu Qi parted ways with Mu Lai, he was preparing himself to return to the Limitless sect, as the sect's recruitment trials would begin in 6 months, where the 3 great sects would recruit a new batch of fresh blood. And in 2 months, it would be the sect's internal contests for its disciples. Every sect would have their top 10 ranks and the top 100 ranking charts. Those who fall out of the top 100, would be demoted to become regular disciples. So whenever this period nears, all those who were not on the charts would be eyeing for a spot covetously and the ones on the charts would be jittery and nervous, afraid that they would fall off the chart, tirelessly working hard to increase their powers day and night. Before Mu Qi left, he went to see someone. Chapter 91. 1. The truth is just that cruel, you were looking for me. To Mu Qi, Xianyuan Che's crown prince residence should be become too familiar to him. Because he was going to leave here tonight, he came over here straight away after he received word from a foot soldier. The man was dressed in an ivory white brocade robe as he stood, his hands held behind his back, looking different from the normally lofty and unreachable crown prince in the imperial palace. He was in his own residence now and dressed in such simple regular clothes made him a lot more approachable. Xianyuan Che immediately saw the young man fall right onto the lounge like he did not have any bones in his body, and Xianyuan Che's eyes glinted slightly before he tossed a exquisitely well-made little urn over. Seeing that, the young man sprung up like a carp in water to catch the urn firmly before bringing under his nose to take a whiff. His good-looking eyes then lit up. Such great wine! This is of at least a 50-year vintage. Where did you get this precious treasure from? Mu Qi was a born alcoholic, and he was clearly only about 17 or 18 years old, but he had already developed a great tolerance for wine where 1,000 cups would not take him down. It could be seen from here just how many years he had been immersed in drink. It was a gift from a friend many years back, and I have kept it for very long. Xianyuan Che said with a gentle voice. Hearing those words, Mu Qi's gaze turned fierce, the expression on his face filling up with anger. That's just great, you hold such great wine and you did not bring it out to share earlier but kept it hidden for yourself. You can still call yourself a brother? The young man looked like his feelings had been gravely deceived. Xianyuan Che merely glanced at him and then slowly said, the wine was kept just for you, but when I wanted to bring it out to share, you had already left without a sound. Left without leaving even a single word. Mu Qi was taken aback a moment, and he lowered his eyes to smile to himself without saying a word as he plucked the wooden stopper off the wine urn. The thick heady fragrance of wine immediately filled up the entire room. This wine is really great. Mu Qi said in high praise before he picked up 2 cups from the table to pour out the wine. Have a taste. Xianyuan Che walked over and sat down, watching the young man down the entire cup like a thirsty cow. His eyes narrowed and he took a very slight sip. Mu Qi saw his actions and could not help but burst out laughing. You are still as self-restrained as ever. But compared to the past where you would refuse even a single drop, you have improved quite a bit. Ah Qi, you know what I want to ask you. Xianyuan Che put down his cup and said in a soft voice. Mu Qi shook his head as he poured out another cup for himself. It's all already in the past, why are you still worrying about it? I have let it all go. Just as he was about to empty the cup of wine, a large hand held his arm. You've let go. You've truly let it go completely. Xianyuan Che knew that Mu Qi was just doing what he had always done, refusing to face up to the problem and running away from speaking about it. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. If you've truly let go, then why are you still so distant towards me? Xianyuan Che said with a curl of his lips, his tone seemingly slightly mocking. Do you know what you were like in the past? You were a person whose feelings were clearly written upon your face, be it joy, anger, sadness or delight. When you were angry, you would vent it out on me, but now, you seem to have become like all the hypocritical and pretentious people, always showing only a slovenly and indifferent smile on your face. Mu Qi froze a moment before he arched his lips up into a smile. Isn't it good? The person I was in the past was young and brash, always making rash decisions. Back then. What really happened? Xianyuan Che's hands pressing down on his unconsciously tightened. He desperately wanted to know why after he returned from the faint mist sex recruitment trials back then, everything had changed completely. Ah Qi's mother was the most revered imperial concubine who was second only to the empress. How did she end up being discovered by people in the palace to have taken her own life in her own bedchambers? Chapter 91. 2. The truth is just that cruel, and why had our imperial father been so heavy-handed with Ah Qi, who had not even been a full 10 years of age back then? Such a young child, and he was given 50 lashes. The whip was filled with hooked barbs throughout its length, and every single lash from it would hook up slivers of flesh and blood. How had Ah Chi managed to survive through that? He only remembered that when he returned back to the palace, the bright grisly red trail of blood had stretched from the main hall to reach a very far distance, and the palace servants were wiping up the bloodstains on the floor, which took them a very long period of time. He had been greatly shocked by the scene. He did not know just how much blood Ah Chi had shed, but the one thing he knew was that all that blood had been from Ah Chi, the person he cared for the most. He heard from people in the palace that the sixth prince had left immediately after receiving his punishment. The tiny frame had taken each highly laborious step slowly and painfully as he walked towards the doors out from the palace. It was probably due to the gravity of his wounds that he would waver and fall after moving some distance, but would pick himself back up again to carry on. In the end, he was already practically crawling when he went out of the palace. Just hearing that, and he was able to imagine that scene. Just how painful had it been for Ah Chi? And how was he really feeling in his heart when he was leaving the very place he had grown up in? Just overnight, his mother who loved him so much had died, and even his imperial father had abandoned him. Every time that Xianyuan Che thought about what Mu Chi went through, it was so heartbreaking that he would feel the pain right into his bones. Mu Chi looked at Xianyuan Che's sad and solemn face, his eyes serious. A good while passed before he then brushed off Xianyuan Che's hand on him. He then downed the wine in the cup before he said, "You asked me here just to ask me this? That happened 10 years ago, and why are you still asking about such small old matters that had already gone rotten? Aren't we still good brothers all the same?" "You are lying." Xianyuan Che's gaze turned cold. "You hate me, don't you?" He had not forgotten back when they had seen each other for the last time, how Mu Chi's eyes that were always prone to smiles had been filled with unbridled murder. Although it had been just a passing instant, he had still caught that fleeting look. It was probably because they had spent such a long time with each other and he cared for Mu Chi greatly. Xianyuan Che still remembered that look in Mu Chi's eyes till this day. But they had once been so very close. Throughout the vast and enormous imperial palace, with so many princes and princesses in there, only the two of them were able to chat with each other amicably, and that was also a kind of affinity between them. This mystery had troubled Xianyuan Che for many years, and it was still a heavy knot in his heart today. "Big brother, there are some things that you does not require you to pursue till you get to the bottom of it," Mu Chi said softly. "It was only because of your invitation that I came to set foot into this place again this time. But, there will not be a second exception. Just what could have caused father to fly into such a rage that he would denounce your status as a member of the imperial family, and also about your mother? Xianyuan Che, I'm telling you not to ask anymore. Don't you understand? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Finally, the young man's face no longer had that lazy and indifferent smile hanging upon it, and his voice had turned chilling as he spoke, his gaze icy as he stared at Xianyuan Che. "Unless you tell it to me." Xianyuan Che furrowed up his brows, and replied with steely resolve. He did not want a barrier to forever remain between them, and did not wish to see Mu Chi face him with that fake and perfunctory smile on his face. After a long silence, Mu Chi finally stood up from the lounge chair, and his tall slender frame stood straight as a rod in his spot, the air suddenly turning stifling around him. "What do you want to know?" The young man then leaned in close, his full red lips slightly open. "Why my mother took her own life?" "Because her scandalous deed had been discovered, and the imperial concubine of the kingdom had not been able to endure the loneliness while she was pregnant and had illicit relations with another man, which caused her to miscarry. And in order not to shame Xianyuan Ao, the ruler of the kingdom, besides dragging her own battered and wretched body to end her own life, was there even a better way for her to resolve the problem?" You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.